The stagecoach door swung open, and 18-year-old Eliza Callahan stepped into a life she never wanted, sold by her father to a stranger, a widowed rancher haunted by his dead wife's ghost. She was meant to be nothing more than a caretaker, a replacement for three motherless children. But when Elias McKenna's steel-gray eyes met hers across that dusty yard, something shifted in the Colorado wind. This wasn't just an arrangement anymore. This was destiny wearing the disguise of desperation. If you're watching this story unfold, stay with me until the very end, and comment below with your city so I can see how far this tale of heartbreak and healing has traveled across the world. The parlor smelled of pipe tobacco and broken promises. Eliza Callahan sat rigid in the horsehair chair, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Across from her, her father paced before the fireplace, his boots striking the worn floorboards with the rhythm of a judge delivering a sentence. Outside, the October rain hammered against the windows of their Boston townhouse, but inside, the silence between his words was deafening. "The matter is settled," Charles Callahan announced, not looking at his daughter. "You'll leave for Colorado Territory in 2 weeks." "Father, please." Eliza's voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "Enough." He spun to face her, his expression carved from granite. "You'll marry Elias McKenna. He's a respected rancher, a widower with 3 children who need a mother. He's offered a generous sum and guaranteed your security. It's more than a girl of your station could hope for." Eliza felt the walls closing in. 18 years old, and her life was being bartered like livestock at market. "But I don't know him. I don't know anything about him except what you've told me. What more do you need to know?" Her father's voice rose, frustration bleeding through his measured composure. "Your mother's medical bills have buried us in debt. The creditors are circling. This arrangement saves us all, Eliza. It saves you." The unspoken words hung in the air between them. Your mother's illness. Your fault we're here. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. But Eliza had learned long ago that fairness was a luxury reserved for those with power, and she had none. She was a commodity, a solution to a problem, a warm body to fill a cold house thousands of miles away. "When?" she asked, her voice hollow. "The 15th. Your train leaves at dawn." 13 days. She had 13 days before her life as she knew it ended. That night, Eliza stood at her bedroom window and watched the rain turn to sleet. Somewhere out west, beyond the frontier settlements and past the edge of civilization, a man she'd never met was preparing to take her as his wife. Elias McKenna. Even his name felt foreign on her tongue, hard consonants and frontier roughness, nothing like the soft, cultured names of Boston society. She tried to imagine him. Widowed, her father had said. 3 children. A ranch in the Colorado Territory. In the letters that had been exchanged, negotiations really, conducted through her father without her knowledge until everything was decided, McKenna had included only the barest facts. Age 32. Wife deceased 18 months prior. Ranch of 800 acres. Children aged 8, 5, and 2. No photograph. No words of courtship. No pretense that this was anything other than what it was. A transaction. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparations that felt more like funeral arrangements than wedding plans. Her mother, pale and weak in her sickbed, wept as she helped Eliza pack her trunk. "I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry, my darling girl." "It's not your fault, Mama," Eliza replied, though part of her, the angry, frightened part she tried to suppress, wondered if that was true, if her mother hadn't fallen ill, if the medical bills hadn't mounted. If. Her few friends came to say goodbye, their eyes full of pity. They brought small gifts, a handkerchief, a pressed flower, a book of poems, tokens meant to comfort, but that only deepened her sense of being sent into exile. Margaret Thornton, her closest friend since childhood, gripped her hands and said with tears streaming down her face, "Write to me. Promise you'll write." "I promise," Eliza said, though she wondered what she would write about. "Dear Margaret, today I scrubbed floors for a man who regards me as little more than an unpaid servant. Today I mothered children who resent me for not being their real mother. Today I lay awake in a stranger's house, wondering how my life came to this." The morning of her departure arrived with cruel swiftness. The sky was still dark when her father shook her awake. She dressed in her traveling clothes, a sensible wool dress in deep blue, a practical choice that her mother had insisted upon, and came downstairs to find her trunk already loaded onto the waiting carriage. Her mother couldn't rise from bed to see her off. Eliza spent their final moments together in that dim bedroom, holding her mother's thin hand and trying to memorize every detail of her face. "Be brave, my love," her mother whispered, "and be kind. Kindness will see you through when nothing else will." "I'll try, Mama." "And Eliza?" Her mother's grip tightened. "Don't let bitterness take root in your heart. I know this isn't the life you dreamed of, but sometimes the paths we don't choose become the ones that lead us where we need to be." Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. The train station was chaos, steam and noise, and crowds of people all going somewhere with purpose, while she felt like she was being carried away by a current she couldn't fight. Her father purchased her ticket: Boston to Chicago, Chicago to Denver, Denver to a tiny settlement called Pine Ridge, where McKenna would meet her, and pressed a small leather purse into her hands. "For emergencies," he said. "There's $50 inside. Don't spend it foolishly." "Thank you, Father." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment she thought she saw regret flicker across his face. But then the train whistle blew, and the moment passed. "You're doing the right thing, Eliza, for all of us." She wanted to scream that she wasn't doing anything. This was being done to her. But she only nodded and boarded the train. As it pulled away from the station, she pressed her face to the window and watched Boston disappear into the morning mist. Everything she'd ever known, everyone she'd ever loved, falling away with each turn of the wheels. She was unmoored, adrift, being carried toward an uncertain shore. The journey west was its own kind of torture. 3 days on trains that rattled her bones and stole her sleep. 3 days of watching the landscape transform from the familiar green hills of home to the endless flat prairie, then to the dramatic rise of mountains that looked like the very edge of the world. She shared train cars with other travelers, families heading west to claim homestead land, businessmen in dusty suits, a group of mail-order brides who chattered excitedly about the men waiting for them. Eliza couldn't bring herself to join their conversations. Their hope felt alien to her, incomprehensible. One of the brides, a cheerful girl named Sally with bright red hair, sat beside her on the second day. "You look awfully glum for a girl about to get married," she observed. "Is your fellow not handsome?" "I don't know," Eliza admitted. "I've never met him." Sally's eyes widened. "Truly? Well, that makes 2 of us. I've only seen a photograph of my John, but he looks strong as an ox. They say the ranchers out here need sturdy wives who can work hard. Are you sturdy?" Eliza looked down at her small hands, her slim frame. "No, I don't suppose I am." "Well, you'll toughen up quick enough," Sally said with confidence that Eliza envied. "The frontier makes steel out of silk, that's what they say. You'll see." But Eliza didn't want to be made into steel. She wanted to be left as silk, soft, and safe in the life she'd known. Denver came and went in a blur of elevation sickness and thinner air. Then came the final leg, a bone-rattling stagecoach journey from Denver to Pine Ridge through country so wild and beautiful it hurt to look at. Mountains thrust up against impossibly blue skies. Valleys rolled out in waves of gold and green. Eagles soared overhead, and once, in the distance, she glimpsed what the driver said was a herd of elk. It was magnificent. It was terrifying. The stagecoach carried only 3 passengers: Eliza, a grizzled prospector who smelled of whiskey and said nothing, and a stern-faced woman in widow's weeds who spent the entire journey reading her Bible and occasionally glancing at Eliza with what might have been sympathy or judgment. It was hard to tell. They stopped at way stations along the route, rough establishments where Eliza choked down whatever food was offered and tried not to think about the privies that were little more than holes in the ground. This was her life now, this rawness, this roughness. No more polished mahogany and gaslight. No more afternoon teas and piano recitals. This was the frontier, and she was being delivered to its heart. On the 4th day of travel, just as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western peaks, the driver called down, "Pine Ridge ahead!" Eliza's heart began to pound. She smoothed her travel-rumpled dress and tried to tuck the loose strands of dark hair back into her bun. Her hands were shaking, Pine Ridge was hardly more than a collection of rough-hewn buildings clustered along a dirt main street. A general store, a saloon, what looked like a church, a few scattered houses. The stagecoach pulled up in front of the store, and the driver hauled down the luggage with practiced efficiency. "Someone meeting you, miss?" he asked. "Yes, I think so. Elias McKenna?" "McKenna, sure, I know him. Good man. Keeps to himself mostly since his wife passed, but solid as they come." The driver squinted down the street. "That'll be him now." Eliza's breath caught. A man was walking toward them from the far end of the street, leading a horse and wagon. Even from a distance, she could see he was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the easy confidence of someone who knew this land and his place in it. He wore a dark shirt, leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. Her future husband. The reality of it hit her like a physical blow. This was happening. This was real. In a matter of days, she would be married to this stranger, living in his house, caring for his children, sharing his... She couldn't finish the thought. Heat flooded her face. Elias McKenna stopped a few feet away and removed his hat. "Miss Callahan?" "Yes." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. She forced herself to look at him, really look at him. He was younger than she'd expected, though the lines around his eyes and the set of his jaw spoke of hard years and harder losses. His hair was dark brown, sun-streaked at the temples, and his eyes, steel gray like storm clouds, regarded her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not unkindness, but not warmth either. Wariness, perhaps. Assessment. He was, she realized with a start, handsome. Devastatingly so, in a rough-hewn way that had nothing to do with Boston society's standards and everything to do with the stark beauty of this wild place. The thought unsettled her almost as much as everything else. "I'm Elias McKenna," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Welcome to Pine Ridge, Miss Callahan. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "It was long," she managed. "I imagine so." He moved to collect her trunk, lifting it as though it weighed nothing. "The ranch is about an hour's ride from here. The children are eager to meet you." The children, his children, who would be her responsibility now. She'd been so focused on the marriage itself that she'd almost forgotten about them. 3 of them, Jacob, Claire, and baby Anna. She knew their names, but nothing else. "I'm eager to meet them as well," she said, though eager was far from the right word. Terrified. Overwhelmed. Completely unprepared. Elias secured her trunk in the back of the wagon and then offered his hand to help her up to the seat. His palm was calloused, rough against her soft skin, and the touch sent an unexpected jolt through her. She settled onto the wooden bench, trying to arrange her skirts, while maintaining some semblance of dignity. He climbed up beside her, and she was suddenly, acutely aware of how close they were. His shoulder was inches from hers. She could smell him, leather and sage and something else, something clean and masculine that made her feel strange and off balance. "We'll stop at the general store first," he said, not looking at her as he gathered the reins. "Mrs. Patterson wanted to meet you, and I need to pick up some supplies." "Of course." The general store was dim and crowded, every surface covered with goods, bolts of fabric, farming implements, canned goods, barrels of flour and sugar. A plump woman with gray hair and kind eyes bustled out from behind the counter the moment they entered. "Elias, and this must be Miss Callahan." She seized Eliza's hands before she could respond. "Oh, my dear, welcome. Welcome to our little town. We're so pleased you've come. Those poor children have needed a mother, and Elias here has been running himself ragged trying to manage everything alone." "Martha," Elias said quietly, a note of warning in his voice. "Oh, hush. I'm just welcoming the girl." Mrs. Patterson beamed at Eliza. "If you need anything, dear, advice, supplies, just a friendly ear, you come right to me. We women have to look after each other out here." "Thank you," Eliza said, genuinely touched by the warmth. "That's very kind." They spent another few minutes in the store while Elias collected his supplies, and Mrs. Patterson peppered Eliza with questions about her journey, her family, her experience with children. Eliza answered as best she could, aware of Elias standing nearby, listening to every word. Finally, they were back in the wagon, heading out of town along a rutted dirt road that wound between golden hills. The late afternoon sun painted everything in amber light, And despite her anxiety, Eliza couldn't help but be moved by the beauty of it all. The sky was so vast here, so open. It made her feel both impossibly small and somehow more real than she'd ever felt in Boston's narrow streets. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Elias glanced at her, surprised. "You think so?" "Yes, very much." Something in his expression softened slightly. "It is. Harsh sometimes, especially in winter, but beautiful. My wife—" He stopped abruptly, his jaw tightening. "It's beautiful. My wife." The ghost had been invoked, suddenly present in the space between them. Eliza looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "I can't imagine how difficult it must have been." "Thank you." His voice was stiff, formal. Then, after a long pause, "Miss Callahan, I want to be clear about the nature of this arrangement." Her heart sank. Here it was, the truth laid bare. "I need someone to care for my children," he continued, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "They need stability, a woman's influence, someone who can give them the attention and care I can't provide while running the ranch. That's what this marriage is about, the children's welfare." "I understand," she said, though understanding didn't make it hurt less. "I can't offer you romance or courtship. I had that once, and His hands tightened on the reins. "I'm not looking for it again. But I can offer you respect, security, and a home. I'll treat you fairly, Miss Callahan. You have my word on that." "And what do you expect from me, Mr. McKenna?" She was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Care for the children, help manage the household, be a mother to Jacob, Clara, and Anna." He paused. "And eventually, when you're ready, be a wife in truth. I'd like more children, if God wills it." Heat flooded her face again. So there it was. Not immediately, he was saying, but eventually, he would expect she would be required. "I see," she whispered. "But there's no rush," he added quickly, perhaps sensing her panic. "We'll take time to adjust. I'm not a brute, Miss Callahan." "I didn't think you were." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Eliza tried to imagine what lay ahead. This house full of children and memories of a dead woman. This man beside her who spoke of duty and nothing else. This life she'd been thrust into without choice or preparation. "Tell me about the children," she said finally, needing to fill the silence with something other than her own spiraling thoughts. Elias's expression warmed noticeably. "Jacob is 8. He's a good boy, responsible, helps with the ranch work when he can. Smart too. Loves books when he can get his hands on them. Clara is 5. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She's having the hardest time. She was very close to her mother. And then there's Anna. She just turned 2. She doesn't remember her mother at all, which is perhaps a mercy." A mercy, Eliza thought, or a tragedy. To never know the woman who gave you life. "They know I'm coming." "Yes, I told them about you." Jacob seemed pleased. "Anna's too young to understand. Clara—" He trailed off. "Clara isn't happy about it," Eliza finished. "She's protective of her mother's memory. It's natural." He glanced at her. "Don't expect her to warm to you immediately. It'll take time." "I won't try to replace their mother," Eliza said firmly. "I couldn't, even if I wanted to. I'll just try to be, something good for them, something helpful." For the first time, she saw something like approval in his eyes. "That's all I'm asking." The ranch came into view as they crested a hill, and Eliza's breath caught. It was larger than she'd imagined, a sprawling 2-story house with a wide front porch surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Beyond it, the land rolled away in every direction, acres and acres of golden grass and distant mountains. It was isolated, certainly, but there was a stark beauty to it that called to something deep in her chest. "Home," Elias said simply. As they drew closer, Eliza could see figures on the porch. A tall boy, Jacob, surely, standing straight and watchful. A smaller figure pressed against the railing, Clara. And in the doorway, an older woman holding a toddler in her arms. "That's Mrs. Henley," Elias explained. "She's been helping with the children for the past year. She'll stay another week to help you settle in. Then she'll return to her daughter's place in Pine Ridge. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the house, and suddenly Eliza couldn't move. This was it. The moment everything became real. She was about to meet the children who would be her responsibility, enter the house where another woman had lived and died, begin a life she never wanted and didn't know how to navigate. Miss Callahan? Elias had already climbed down and was offering his hand. Are you all right? No, she wasn't all right. She was terrified and overwhelmed and so far from everything familiar that she might as well have traveled to the moon. But she took his hand anyway and let him help her down. Her legs were shaky from the long ride, and for a moment she swayed, steadied by his hand on her elbow. I've got you, he said quietly. Did he? Did anyone? Mrs. Henley came down the porch steps, baby Anna balanced on her hip. She was a sturdy woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense air about her. So you're the new Mrs. McKenna, she said, looking Eliza up and down. You're younger than I expected. I'm 18, ma'am. 18. Mrs. Henley shook her head. Well, you'll age quick enough out here. This ain't Boston, girl, but you look like you've got some spine in you. You'll need it. She thrust the baby toward Eliza. This is Anna. She's teething something fierce and hasn't napped worth a damn today, begging your pardon for the language. Eliza took the child awkwardly, unprepared for the solid weight of her. Anna regarded her with solemn brown eyes, her father's eyes, and then, without warning, began to wail. She's fussy with strangers, Mrs. Henley said over the noise. Give her time. Eliza bounced the screaming child ineffectively, panic rising in her chest. She had no idea what to do. She'd never held a baby in her life, never been around young children. What had she been thinking? How was she supposed to— Here! Elias took Anna from her gently and settled the child against his shoulder. Anna's cries subsided to whimpers almost immediately. It's all right, sweet girl. It's all right. The tenderness in his voice, the practiced ease of his movements, made Eliza's chest ache with something she couldn't name. He was a good father. Whatever else he might be, he loved his children. Jacob, Clara, Elias called toward the porch. Come meet Miss Callahan. Jacob descended the steps with the cautious dignity of a boy trying to be a man. He was tall for 8, with his father's dark hair and serious expression. He stopped in front of Eliza and executed a small formal bow. Pleased to meet you, Miss Callahan. Pa says you're going to take care of us now. I'm going to try, Eliza said, smiling at him. Your father tells me you like books. So do I. A spark of interest lit his eyes. Do you? What kinds of books? All kinds. Poetry, novels, histories. Can you read Robinson Crusoe? I've been trying, but some of the words are too hard. I'd be happy to read it with you. Jacob, go help unload Miss Callahan's trunk, Elias instructed. The boy nodded and moved toward the wagon, leaving Eliza facing the small figure still pressed against the porch railing. Clara McKenna was tiny for 5, with honey blonde hair and braids and eyes that were a striking shade of blue, eyes that regarded Eliza with open hostility. She wore a simple calico dress and clutched a rag doll to her chest like a shield. Hello, Clara, Eliza said gently, moving closer. I'm very happy to meet you. Your father has told me so much about you. Clara's chin lifted. You're not my mama. The words delivered in a clear, defiant voice landed like blows. No, Eliza agreed softly. I'm not. No one could ever be your mama but her. I'm not here to take her place, Clara. I'm just here to help. We don't need help. We were fine without you. Clara, Elias said sharply. That's enough. Apologize to Miss Callahan. No. Tears suddenly flooded Clara's eyes, but her expression remained fierce. I won't. I won't. She whirled and ran into the house, the screen door slamming behind her. Silence fell over the yard. Eliza felt her face burning with embarrassment and hurt. She'd known this wouldn't be easy, but the raw rejection still stung. I'm sorry, Elias said quietly, Anna still against his shoulder. She's struggling. It's all right, Eliza said, though it wasn't. Nothing about this was all right. She has every right to her feelings. Mrs. Henley snorted. Feelings or not, she can't be rude. I'll speak to her. No, Eliza said quickly. Please don't. She's grieving. Let her be. The older woman studied her with new respect. Maybe you do have spine after all. She gestured toward the house. Come on then, I'll show you around before I get supper started. Elias, you and Jacob see to the horses and Miss Callahan's trunk. Eliza followed Mrs. Henley into the house, her heart pounding. This was her home now. These rooms where another woman had lived, laughed, died. These walls that held memories she could never share. The interior was surprisingly well appointed, not rough frontier housing, but a real home with polished wood floors, furniture that had clearly been chosen with care, framed photographs on the walls. The parlor held a piano, its surface dusty from disuse. The kitchen was large and well stocked, with a massive black stove and a sturdy table that could seat 8. Second floor is bedrooms, Mrs. Henley explained, leading the way up the stairs. Elias's room is at the end of the hall. That's where you'll sleep once you're properly wed. For now, I've put you in the spare room across from the children. Jacob has his own room, and Clara and Anna share. My room is downstairs off the kitchen, but I'll be leaving next week. Next week. 1 week to learn everything she needed to know about running this household, caring for these children, being a wife to a man she didn't know. Mrs. Henley pushed open a door to reveal a small but pleasant room with a brass bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the corrals. Eliza's trunk sat at the foot of the bed, already delivered by Jacob and Elias. It's not much, but it's clean, Mrs. Henley said. You'll want to freshen up before supper. Water in the pitcher is cold, but there's a hot kettle downstairs if you need it. Supper's in an hour. She left Eliza alone, and for the first time all day, Eliza let herself sink onto the bed and simply breathe. Her hands were shaking again. Everything was shaking. Her body, her composure, the foundations of who she thought she was. She was here. She was actually here, in this strange house, about to become the wife of a man who wanted nothing from her but service and eventually children. About to become mother to 3 children who didn't want her, or at least one who very much didn't. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Miss Callahan? It was Jacob's voice, tentative through the door. Yes? Come in. The boy entered, holding a book carefully in both hands. I thought maybe, if you weren't too tired, we could read some of Robinson Crusoe, just a little bit. Looking at his hopeful face, Eliza felt something in her chest ease slightly. Here, at least, was one person who wanted her here. One small connection in a house full of strangers and grief. I'd like that very much, she said, patting the bed beside her. Come sit. They read together for half an hour, Jacob sounding out the difficult words while Eliza helped him through the harder passages. He was bright, as Elias had said, and hungry for learning. He asked her questions about the story, about England, about what it must be like to be shipwrecked on an island. Do you think you'd survive? He asked. If you were shipwrecked? I don't know, Eliza said honestly. I suppose you don't know what you're capable of until you're tested. Pa says the frontier tests everyone. He says it makes you stronger or breaks you, and there's no in-between. And what do you think? Jacob considered this seriously. I think it's doing both to him, making him stronger but breaking him too. He looked up at her with those solemn eyes. Maybe you can help fix what's broken. Before Eliza could respond, Mrs. Henley's voice boomed up the stairs. Supper! The dining room table was an exercise in awkwardness. Elias sat at the head, Eliza to his right, Jacob to his left. Mrs. Henley took the foot of the table with Anna in a high chair beside her. The only empty place was next to Eliza, Clara's spot, and the little girl's absence was a presence all its own. Where's your sister? Elias asked Jacob. She said she wasn't hungry. She needs to eat. I'll take her up a plate later, Mrs. Henley said. Let her sulk for now. She'll come around. The meal, roast chicken, potatoes, green beans from the summer garden, was delicious, but Eliza could barely taste it. She was too aware of Elias beside her, of the weight of expectations and uncertainties, of the ghost that seemed to hover over the table though no one mentioned her. Miss Callahan has offered to help Jacob with his reading, Elias said, breaking the silence. That's good, Mrs. Henley approved. Boy needs schooling. It's a shame the teacher in Pine Ridge left last spring. No one's replaced her yet. I could teach him, Eliza offered, and Clara too when she's ready. You know about teaching? Elias looked surprised. I attended a good school in Boston. I'm not trained as a teacher, but I could manage the basics: reading, arithmetic, history, geography. That would be, Elias paused, something like gratitude in his eyes. That would be very helpful. Thank you. After supper, Mrs. Henley showed Eliza the rhythms of the household, where things were kept, how to work the temperamental stove, when the children needed to be put to bed. It was overwhelming, but Eliza took mental notes, determined to prove she could handle this even if she felt like she was drowning. When the children were settled, Jacob in his room with his book, Anna asleep in her crib, Clara still refusing to come out, Eliza found herself alone with Elias on the front porch. The sun had set, and stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, more stars than she'd ever seen in her life. "I want to show you something," Elias said quietly. He led her around the side of the house to a small fenced area beneath a willow tree. Inside the fence were two wooden crosses, simply carved. The larger one read, "Sarah McKenna, beloved wife and mother, 1850 to 1882. Eliza's throat tightened. Sarah. Her name had been Sarah. "I wanted you to know where she is," Elias said, his hat in his hands, his voice rough. "She's part of this place, part of these children. I can't pretend she never existed, and I won't ask you to." "I wouldn't want you to," Eliza said softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the pain etched into every line of his face. This was a man still deep in grief, still bound to the woman buried beneath that willow tree. How could she ever compete with a ghost? How could she ever be enough? "I know this isn't fair to you," he said. "You're young. You should be courted properly, should have choices. But I'm grateful you're here. The children need you. The children need you. Not I need you. Not even welcome. Just the children." "I'll do my best by them," Eliza promised. "That's all I can offer." "It's enough." But as she lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this house settling around her, Eliza wondered if it would ever truly be enough. She was 18 years old, 1,200 miles from everything she'd known, married to a ghost as much as to a man. And tomorrow it would all become real. The wedding would bind her here forever. The morning sun was barely touching the horizon when Eliza woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and boots on hardwood floors. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in Boston, that the past weeks had been nothing but a fever dream. Then she opened her eyes to unfamiliar walls, and reality crashed down like cold water. Today was her wedding day. There was no excitement, no flutter of anticipation, just a heavy inevitability settling into her bones. In a few hours, she would stand before a minister and promise herself to a man who saw her as a solution to a problem. She would become Mrs. Elias McKenna, stepmother to 3 children, mistress of a house that still belonged to a dead woman. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. "Miss Callahan," Mrs. Henley's voice came through the door. "Time to get up. Reverend Michaels will be here at 10, and there's breakfast to make." Breakfast to make. On her wedding morning. Eliza almost laughed at the absurdity of it. She dressed quickly in the same blue traveling dress she'd worn yesterday. It was the nicest thing she owned, though hardly wedding finery. In Boston, girls spent months planning their weddings, choosing fabrics for gowns, selecting flowers, dreaming of cathedral ceremonies with hundreds of guests. Eliza would have a quick ceremony in a rancher's parlor with a handful of witnesses and no white dress to mark the occasion. The kitchen was already warm when she entered, Mrs. Henley at the stove and Jacob sitting at the table carefully cutting slices of bread. The boy looked up and gave her a tentative smile. "Morning, Miss Callahan. Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Eliza admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. Mrs. Henley turned from the stove with a knowing look. "That's natural enough. Every bride gets the jitters. You'll settle in soon enough." "But I'm not every bride," Eliza wanted to say. Every bride isn't purchased like cattle. Every bride isn't replacing a ghost. "Where's your father?" she asked Jacob instead. "Out with the horses already. He's always up before dawn." The boy hesitated. "He's nervous too, I think. I heard him pacing last night." So she wasn't alone in her anxiety. That was something, at least. Anna was already in her high chair, smearing porridge across her face with apparent delight. When she saw Eliza, the toddler's face crumpled and she reached for Mrs. Henley with a wail. She'll warm to you, Mrs. Henley said, scooping the child up. Just give her time. Time. Everyone kept saying that, as if time would magically make this situation less impossible. Clara didn't appear for breakfast. When Eliza asked, Mrs. Henley just shook her head. Still in her room. Stubborn as her mother was, that one. The words hung in the air. Her mother, Sarah, the woman whose shadow filled every corner of this house. What was she like? Eliza asked quietly. Mrs. McKenna, Sarah, Mrs. Henley considered this question while she cleaned Anna's face. Beautiful. Not just pretty, but truly beautiful, inside and out. She had a way of making everyone feel special, could walk into a room and light it up just by smiling. She paused. She and Elias were love matches, rare out here. They met at a church social in Denver, and he courted her proper, moved heaven and earth to build this house for her before the wedding. She wasn't cut out for frontier life, came from a good family, had education and refinement, but she never complained, just loved her family and made the best of it. Each word was a knife. Beautiful, refined, beloved. A love match. How could Eliza ever measure up to that? How could she ever be anything but a pale imitation, a necessary substitute that would never be enough? She died giving birth to Anna, Mrs. Henley continued, her voice softer now. Bled out before we could even get the doctor from Pine Ridge. Elias held her while she went. I've never seen a man so broken. He wouldn't speak for 3 days after, just sat by her grave from sunrise to sunset. That's horrible, Eliza whispered. It's the frontier. Women die in childbirth all the time out here, but knowing that doesn't make it easier. Mrs. Henley met Eliza's eyes. I'm telling you this not to scare you, but so you understand what you're walking into. That man out there is still grieving. Those children are still grieving. They need you, Miss Callahan, but they're not ready to admit it yet. Before Eliza could respond, the back door opened and Elias entered, hat in hand, his shirt damp with sweat from morning work. He stopped when he saw her, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or uncertainty. Miss Callahan, I didn't know you were up. I'm an early riser, she lied. In truth, she'd rarely seen dawn in Boston, but that life was gone now. He nodded, awkward in a way he hadn't been yesterday. Reverend Michaels will be here soon. I need to clean up. Of course. He disappeared upstairs and Eliza felt the weight of what was coming pressed down harder. In just hours, they would be bound together, for better or worse, till death do us part. Mrs. Henley put a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. Eat, you'll need your strength. But Eliza's stomach was in knots. She managed a few bites, more to be polite than from any real appetite, while Jacob chattered about a bird's nest he'd found in the barn, and Anna banged her spoon against the high chair. Normal morning sounds in a house preparing for a wedding that felt anything but normal. At 9:30, a buggy rolled up the drive. Through the window, Eliza could see Reverend Michaels, a portly man with white hair and a kind face, being helped down by his wife, a thin woman in her 50s. Behind them came another buggy carrying Mrs. Patterson from the general store and a man Eliza didn't recognize. That's Doc Brennan, Mrs. Henley explained. He serves as witness for most of the weddings and legal matters around here. Good man. Witnesses. Because they needed people to confirm that this transaction had taken place, that Eliza Callahan had legally become Eliza McKenna. Elias came downstairs in clean clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt, a vest that looked like it had been pressed with care. His hair was still damp and neatly combed. He looked, Eliza realized with a pang, like a man going to his own execution. Miss Callahan, he said formally, are you ready? No, she would never be ready. But she nodded anyway. The ceremony was held in the parlor with everyone arranged in a small semicircle before the fireplace. Elias stood straight and stiff as a soldier, Eliza beside him trying not to tremble. Reverend Michaels opened his Bible and began to speak about the sanctity of marriage, about duty and devotion, about cleaving unto one another. Eliza barely heard the words. She was too aware of Elias beside her, of the curious and pitying glances from the small audience, of Clara watching from the staircase with tears streaming down her face. Elias McKenna, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part? I do. His voice was steady, giving nothing away. And do you, Eliza Callahan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part. This was it. Her last chance to run, to refuse, to choose a different path. But there was no different path. There was only this. Duty, survival, the life she'd been given whether she wanted it or not. I do, she whispered. The ring? Elias produced a simple gold band from his pocket. His hands were steady as he slipped it onto her finger, though Eliza's were shaking so badly she could barely hold still. The ring was warm from his pocket, slightly too large, and unmistakably plain. A working man's ring for a working marriage. By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you man and wife. Reverend Michaels smiled benevolently. You may kiss your bride. Eliza's heart stopped. Of course there would be a kiss. There was always a kiss. But she hadn't thought about it, hadn't prepared herself for the reality of Elias McKenna's lips on hers. He turned to her, and she saw her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. Then he leaned down. He was so much taller than her, and pressed his lips to hers in the briefest, most chaste of kisses. It was over almost before it began, but Eliza felt it like a brand. Her first kiss, given and taken in front of strangers as a formality, not an expression of love. Congratulations. Mrs. Patterson rushed forward to embrace them both. Oh, what a lovely ceremony. You make a handsome couple, you truly do. Doc Brennan shook Elias's hand. Best wishes, McKenna. You've got yourself a pretty young wife. Treat her well. I will, Elias said, and Eliza heard the promise in his voice. He would treat her well. He would be fair and respectful and honorable. But he would never love her. That was the unspoken truth beneath all the congratulations and well wishes. Mrs. Henley had prepared a small wedding breakfast, cakes and coffee and cold chicken, and everyone gathered around the dining table to celebrate. Everyone except Clara, who had disappeared back upstairs. Eliza caught Elias looking toward the stairs more than once, his expression pained. I should go talk to her, Eliza said quietly. Maybe it's better to give her space, Elias replied. Or maybe she needs to know I'm not her enemy. She found Clara in the room she shared with Anna, sitting on the floor with her rag doll clutched to her chest. The little girl's face was blotchy from crying, her blue eyes red-rimmed and defiant. Go away, Clara said immediately. Eliza sat down on the floor anyway, keeping a respectful distance. I know you don't want me here. Then leave. I can't. I'm your father's wife now. This is my home, too. It was Mama's home first. The words burst out like a sob. Everything here was Mama's. Her dishes, her curtains, her piano. Even Papa was hers, and now you're going to take it all away and pretend she never existed. No, Eliza said firmly. I'm not. I could never do that, Clara, and I would never try. Your Mama was special. She loved you and your father and your brothers so much. I'm not here to make you forget her. Then why are you here? Clara's voice broke. Why did Papa have to marry you? Because he loves you, Eliza said simply. Because he's trying to give you the best life he can, and he knows you need someone to take care of you. Not to replace your mother, no one could ever do that, but to help. To be there when you're scared or sick or lonely. I don't want you to be there. I want my Mama. I know, sweetheart. I know you do. Clara looked at her with those devastating blue eyes. Sarah's eyes, surely. Did you want to come here? The question caught Eliza off guard with its perceptiveness. No, she admitted. I didn't. My father sent me. So we're both stuck with something we don't want. I suppose we are. Eliza managed a sad smile. But maybe we can make the best of it together. I'm scared too, Clara. I'm far from home, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I miss my mother terribly. We're not so different, you and I. For a moment, she thought she saw Clara's expression soften, but then the little girl's jaw set stubbornly. You're still not my Mama. I know, I'm just Eliza, and I hope someday we can be friends. She left Clara there and returned downstairs, her heart heavy. The wedding guests were preparing to leave, offering final congratulations and advice. Mrs. Patterson pulled Eliza aside and pressed a small package into her hands. Just a little something from the store, some lavender soap and hand cream. A girl should have nice things on her wedding day. Thank you, Eliza said, genuinely touched. That's very kind. And if you ever need to talk, dear, woman to woman, you know where to find me. Mrs. Patterson lowered her voice. It's not easy, being a wife, especially to a man still mourning, but you're stronger than you look, I can tell. After the guests departed, an awkward silence fell over the house. Elias retreated to his study to work on ranch accounts. Mrs. Henley took Anna down for a nap. Jacob disappeared to the barn with a book, and Eliza stood in the middle of the parlor, now officially mistress of this house, with no idea what to do with herself. She wandered through the rooms, seeing them with new eyes. This was her home now. These were her responsibilities. The piano in the corner was dusty. She could clean it. The curtains in the dining room needed mending. She could fix them. The garden visible through the kitchen window was overgrown. She could tend it. Small tasks, manageable tasks, ways to make herself useful and necessary. She found Mrs. Henley in the kitchen preparing lunch. Can I help? The older woman looked surprised. It's your wedding day. You should be resting. I'd rather be useful. Mrs. Henley studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right then. You can start by learning how to make Elias's favorite stew. He'll appreciate a familiar meal tonight. They worked side by side, Mrs. Henley explaining the rhythms of the household as they chopped vegetables and browned meat. The children needed breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, supper at 6. The stove needed to be stoked 3 times a day. Water had to be hauled from the pump behind the house. Laundry was done on Mondays, ironing on Tuesdays. The chickens needed feeding every morning, eggs collected every afternoon. It was overwhelming, but Eliza absorbed it all, determined to prove she could manage. She'd been raised to be a gentleman's wife in Boston, to pour tea and play piano and make polite conversation at dinner parties. Now she needed to become something else entirely, a frontier woman, capable and strong. That night at supper, Eliza served the stew she'd helped prepare. Elias took his first bite and paused, his expression unreadable. It's good, he said finally. Thank you. Such simple words, but they felt like victory. After the meal, after the children were in bed, Eliza found herself alone with Elias in the parlor. He sat in an armchair by the fire, and she perched on the settee, both of them acutely aware that they were now husband and wife, that this was their wedding night, that expectations loomed unspoken in the space between them. I want you to know, Elias said, breaking the painful silence, that I meant what I said yesterday. There's no rush. We can take time to adjust before we're husband and wife in all ways. Relief and something else. Disappointment, hurt, ward in Eliza's chest. Thank you. That's considerate. I've moved some of your things into my room, he continued, not meeting her eyes, for appearances in front of the children and Mrs. Henley. But you can sleep there alone tonight. I'll stay in the spare room. Where will you sleep after Mrs. Henley leaves? We'll figure it out. He stood abruptly. I should check on the horses before bed. Good night, Mrs. McKenna. Mrs. McKenna. She was Mrs. McKenna now. She climbed the stairs to the room that was now supposed to be hers, theirs. It was larger than the spare room, with a 4-poster bed covered in a beautiful quilt, a wardrobe, a dressing table with a mirror. And everywhere, traces of Sarah. A hairbrush on the dressing table, bottles of perfume, a shawl draped over a chair. Eliza felt like an intruder. This was Sarah's room, Sarah's space. How could she possibly sleep here, surrounded by another woman's belongings? She changed into her nightgown and climbed into the big bed, feeling small and lost in its expanse. Outside, she could hear the wind picking up, whistling around the corners of the house. In the distance, a coyote howled. This was her wedding night, and she'd never felt more alone. The next morning, Mrs. Henley began teaching Eliza the more complex aspects of running the household: how to manage the temperamental stove, how to churn butter, how to preserve vegetables for winter. Eliza's hands, soft from her Boston life, quickly blistered and ached, but she pushed through the pain, determined to master these skills. Clara continued to avoid her, but Jacob became a constant companion. He followed her from room to room, asking questions, offering to help, clearly starved for attention and conversation. In him, Eliza found her first real ally. "What was Boston like?" he asked one afternoon as they hung laundry together. "Crowded," Eliza said, pinning one of his shirts to the line. "So many people and buildings that you can barely see the sky. Nothing like here." "Do you miss it?" "Sometimes. I miss my mother and my friend Margaret. But—" She paused, surprised by her own words. "I'm starting to see the beauty here too. The sky is so big, and the mountains are magnificent. Pa says the mountains are God's cathedral. He used to take Mama up into the hills to see the wildflowers every spring." Jacob's face fell. He hasn't gone since she died. Another piece of the puzzle. Another glimpse into the life that had been and the grief that remained. That evening, Eliza noticed Elias standing at the parlor window, staring out at Sarah's grave beneath the willow tree. She'd seen him do this several times now, just standing there, lost in memory, his expression haunted. She wanted to go to him, to offer comfort, but she didn't know how. They were married but strangers, bound by law but separated by grief and circumstance. Later, as she helped Clara and Anna prepare for bed, Clara still resistant but slightly less hostile, she heard raised voices from downstairs. Moving to the top of the stairs, she could make out Elias and Mrs. Henley in the kitchen. "You're going to have to let her in eventually," Mrs. Henley was saying. "That girl is trying her best, and you're treating her like hired help." "I treat her with respect," Elias replied, his voice tight. "Respect isn't enough. She's your wife, Elias. She deserves more than cold courtesy." "What do you want from me, Martha? I married her. I'm providing for her. What more should I do?" "You could try seeing her as a person, not just a solution to a problem. She's 18 years old, for God's sake, scared and alone and trying to find her place in a house full of ghosts. Show her some kindness." Silence. Then, "I'm trying." "Try harder." Eliza crept back to her room, to Sarah's room, her cheeks burning. So even Mrs. Henley saw the distance between them, the coldness of this arrangement. She was trying so hard to be useful, to be worthy, to earn her place. But maybe useful wasn't enough. Maybe worthy wasn't the same as wanted. 3 days passed in a blur of lessons and chores. Eliza learned to make bread, to feed the chickens, to sweep floors and wash windows. Her hands grew rougher, her back ached, but she felt herself growing stronger too. There was satisfaction in mastering these tasks, in seeing the house respond to her care. Clara began to thaw by degrees. She didn't speak to Eliza directly, but she stopped running away when Eliza entered a room. Once, Eliza caught the little girl watching her from the stairs as she played piano, tentatively, self-consciously, testing whether she was allowed to touch Sarah's instrument. "Do you know any songs?" Clara asked suddenly. Eliza's hand stilled on the keys. "A few. Would you like to hear one?" Clara nodded, creeping down the stairs to perch on the edge of a chair. Eliza played a simple lullaby her mother used to sing, and as the notes filled the room, she saw Clara's expression soften. When the song ended, the little girl said quietly, "Mama used to play that one." "Did she? She had good taste. Will you play it again?" "As many times as you want." It was the first real conversation they'd had, and Eliza's heart lifted with hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find her way into this child's heart. On the 4th day, Mrs. Henley announced it was time for her to return to her daughter's home in Pine Ridge. "You're ready," she told Eliza that morning. "You know what needs doing, and you're not afraid of hard work. You'll manage just fine." But as the older woman climbed into Elias's wagon for the ride to town, Eliza felt panic rise in her throat. She wasn't ready. She barely knew what she was doing. How could she possibly manage 3 children and a household on her own? "You'll do well," Mrs. Henley said, as if reading her thoughts. "Trust yourself. And be patient with Elias. He's a good man under all that grief. Give him time. Time. Always time." The house felt different with Mrs. Henley gone. Quieter, more intimidating. Suddenly, every decision was Eliza's to make, every problem hers to solve. When Anna woke from her nap crying and feverish, Eliza had to figure out how to bring down the fever. When Jacob tore his trousers, she had to mend them. When Clara refused to eat her vegetables, she had to find a way to coax her. By the end of that first day alone, Eliza was exhausted in ways she'd never experienced. Every muscle ached, her head pounded, and she wanted nothing more than to collapse into bed and sleep for a week. But there was still supper to make, children to bathe, a kitchen to clean. She was stirring a pot of soup when Elias came in from the barn. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Anna in her high chair covered in mashed carrots, Clara and Jacob at the table playing with wooden blocks, Eliza at the stove with flour in her hair and exhaustion written across her face. "How was your first day?" he asked. "Harder than I expected," she admitted, "but we survived." Something shifted in his expression. "You look tired." "I am tired. Why don't you sit down? I can finish supper." She stared at him in surprise. "You can cook?" "I've been doing it for over a year, Mrs. McKenna. Had to learn quick when Sarah—" He trailed off, jaw tightening. "Sit, please." Too exhausted to argue, Eliza sank into a chair and watched as Elias moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. He finished the soup, sliced bread, poured milk for the children. His movements were sure and capable, so different from the stiff formality he usually showed her. "Papa's a good cook," Jacob said proudly. "He makes the best flapjacks." "Maybe he can teach me," Eliza said. Elias glanced at her. "Maybe." That night, after the children were in bed, they sat together in the parlor again. The silence was less awkward than before, filled instead with a tentative understanding. "Thank you," Eliza said, "for helping with supper. You looked like you needed it." He paused. "Mrs. Henley was right. I haven't been. I should be more helpful. This is new for you." "Everything is new for me," Eliza said softly. "But I'm trying." "I can see that." His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something other than grief and distance there. "You're doing well with the children. Better than I expected." It wasn't much, but it was something. A small recognition of her efforts, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "Clara played piano with me today," Eliza ventured. "Just for a few minutes, but it felt like progress." Elias's expression tightened. "Sarah used to play with her. She was teaching her before—" He stood abruptly. "I should check on the horses." And just like that, the ghost was back, standing between them like an insurmountable barrier. As October deepened into November, a rhythm began to establish itself. Eliza woke at dawn to start breakfast, got the children dressed and fed, spent mornings on housework and afternoons teaching Jacob his letters and numbers. Clara began joining their lessons, grudgingly at first, then with increasing interest. Anna grew accustomed to Eliza's presence, eventually allowing herself to be held without tears. The work was relentless, harder than anything Eliza had ever done in Boston. Her hands, once soft and pale, became rough and chapped. Her dresses grew loose as she lost weight from the constant activity, but she also felt herself changing in ways that had nothing to do with the physical. She was becoming capable, confident, stronger than she'd known she could be. Elias remained distant but not unkind. He helped with the children more than she'd expected, taking over their baths in the evenings, reading to them before bed. He fixed things around the house without being asked: a loose floorboard, a stuck window, the squeaky hinge on the pantry door. He left coffee warming on the stove for her each morning before he went out to the barn. Small gestures, but they meant something. One evening, Eliza was folding laundry when she came across a woman's dress in the basket, beautiful but worn, with delicate embroidery on the collar. Sarah's dress, she realized. Someone had packed it with the children's clothes. She held it up, studying the careful stitching, imagining Sarah wearing it, laughing in it, living in it. They were similar in size, she and Sarah. The dress would probably fit her. That was her favorite. Eliza spun to find Elias in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to—" "It's all right." He stepped into the room, his eyes on the dress. She wore it to church every Sunday, said it made her feel pretty. His voice roughened. Everything made her feel pretty. She had a way of finding joy in the smallest things. Unlike me, Eliza thought. Unlike this arrangement that has no joy in it. "What should I do with it?" she asked quietly. Keep it. Alter it if you need to, or give it away. I can't. He swallowed hard. I can't keep holding on to everything. She's gone, and keeping her clothes won't bring her back. It was the most vulnerable she'd ever seen him, and something in Eliza's chest cracked open. I know I'm not her, she said softly. I know I never will be. But I'm here, Elias, and I'm trying to build something good for your children, for this family. I can't compete with her memory, but maybe I don't have to. Maybe there's room for both of us in this house. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw surprise in his eyes. You're nothing like her, he said finally. The words stung, even though she'd just said them herself. But then he continued. She was sunshine and laughter, never met a stranger. You're quieter, more careful. But you're strong in ways she never had to be, and you're kind to my children even when they make it hard. That's worth something, Mrs. McKenna. That's worth a lot. It wasn't love, it wasn't even affection, but it was recognition, and for now, that was enough. The first snow came in mid-November, transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland overnight. Eliza woke to white covering everything, the world gone quiet and clean. The children were beside themselves with excitement, begging to go outside and play. After chores and lessons, Eliza said firmly, already learning the delicate balance between discipline and joy. But watching them later, bundled in coats and mittens, shrieking with laughter as they threw snowballs and built a lopsided snowman, Eliza felt something warm unfurl in her chest. This was what she'd come here for, wasn't it? To give these children stability, care, happiness. To make a home. Clara ran up to her, cheeks flushed with cold, and grabbed her hand. Come help us, Eliza, please. Eliza, not Miss Callahan, not a reluctant acknowledgement, just her name, said with something close to affection. All right, Eliza laughed, letting herself be pulled into the snow. They played until their fingers were numb and their noses red, until Jacob's lips were turning blue and Anna was crying from cold. As they trooped back inside, tracking snow and chaos into the mudroom, Eliza caught sight of Elias watching from the barn door. The expression on his face was complicated, grief and longing and something else she couldn't quite name. That evening, as she was helping Clara into her nightgown, the little girl said suddenly, I had fun today. So did I. Mama used to play in the snow with us too. Before Anna was born, Clara's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to forget her. Eliza knelt down so they were eye to eye. You won't forget her, sweetheart. I promise. Your mama will always be part of you, in your memories and your heart. And it's okay to be happy, even though she's gone. She would want you to be happy. Do you really think so? I'm certain of it. Mothers always wanted their children to be happy. Clara threw her arms around Eliza's neck in a sudden, fierce hug. I'm glad you're here, she whispered, even though I didn't want you at first. Eliza held her close, tears stinging her own eyes. I'm glad I'm here too. It was the truth she realized with surprise. Despite everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the loneliness, there was something here worth holding on to. These children who were slowly becoming hers. This house that was gradually feeling like home. This life that was harder than anything she'd imagined, but also more real. Later that night, long after the children were asleep, Eliza sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, too tired to move but not quite ready for bed. The day's events played through her mind. Clara's hug, Jacob's laughter, Anna's sleepy weight in her arms, Elias's unreadable expression as he watched them play. She heard footsteps and looked up to find Elias in the doorway. You're up late, he observed. Just thinking. He poured himself coffee and, to her surprise, sat down across from her. They'd shared meals, shared space, but this felt different, more intimate, more deliberate. I saw you playing with the children today, he said. Clara hugged you. She did. He struggled for words. That's good. That's what she needs. She's a wonderful little girl. They all are. You've done well with them, especially given, she trailed off. Given that I had no idea what I was doing? His mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. I'm still figuring it out. We both are. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, and Eliza felt the wall between them lower just slightly. Not disappearing, That would take much longer, but becoming less insurmountable. My mother used to tell me, Eliza said quietly, that sometimes the life you don't choose becomes the one you were meant for. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I was so angry about being sent here, so resentful, but now. She looked around the kitchen, this room she'd learned to navigate, this home she was slowly making her own. Now I'm beginning to see what she meant. Elias studied her for a long moment. You're stronger than you look, Mrs. McKenna. Stronger than I gave you credit for. So are you, Mr. McKenna. Something passed between them then. Not love, not yet, but understanding. Mutual respect. The first tentative threads of partnership. As Eliza finally climbed the stairs to bed, she realized that for the first time since arriving in Colorado, she didn't feel quite so alone. She was building something here, brick by brick, day by day. A place in this family, a purpose. Maybe even, eventually, a future worth wanting. The ghost was still there, would always be there. But perhaps there was room for both Sarah's memory and Eliza's present. Perhaps this house was big enough for all of them. Winter settled over the ranch with a fierce determination that took Eliza's breath away. The snow that had seemed so magical in November became a relentless force by December, piling in drifts against the house and barn, transforming the landscape into an endless white expanse that stretched to the horizon. The wind howled down from the mountains with a cold so sharp it felt like knives against exposed skin. Eliza had never experienced anything like it. Boston winters were cold, certainly, but this was something else entirely. A wild, untamed cold that reminded her daily just how far she was from civilization, how dependent they all were on preparation and providence to survive until spring. The ranch became an island unto itself. Travel to Pine Ridge was impossible except on the clearest days, and even then Elias wouldn't risk it unless absolutely necessary. They were isolated, the five of them, bound together by necessity and proximity in ways that might have been suffocating if Eliza hadn't been so focused on simply keeping them all fed, warm, and alive. She learned quickly that winter on a frontier ranch meant constant work. Wood had to be brought in from the pile behind the barn multiple times a day to feed the insatiable stove. Snow had to be melted for washing water. The chicken coop needed to be checked constantly to ensure the hens hadn't frozen. Meals required careful planning from their dwindling stores. No fresh vegetables now, only what had been preserved in the fall, supplemented by potatoes from the root cellar and the occasional rabbit Elias managed to snare. "You're doing well," Elias said one morning as he came in from feeding the horses, stamping snow from his boots. "Better than I expected, honestly. Most women from back east struggle their first winter out here." Eliza looked up from the bread dough she was kneading, her hands dusted with flour. "I'm struggling. I'm just not letting you see it." He paused, surprised by her honesty, and something that might have been a smile tugged at his mouth. "Fair enough, but you're managing the struggle, and that's what matters." It was true, though some days the managing felt like barely holding on by her fingertips. The isolation wore on her more than she'd expected. She missed adult conversation beyond practical discussions of chores and children. She missed her mother with an ache that sometimes took her breath away. She missed Margaret's letters. The last one had arrived just before the heavy snows began, and now there would be no more until spring. But there were also moments of unexpected beauty. Clara had fully thawed toward her now, seeking her out for comfort when she scraped a knee or felt scared during the howling nighttime storms. Jacob had become her constant shadow, helping with whatever tasks she was tackling, chattering about everything and nothing. Even Anna, no longer a baby but a toddling, babbling little person, would reach for Eliza first when she fell or needed comfort. She was becoming their mother in all but name, and the realization filled her with both joy and a strange, guilty sorrow. These weren't her children. She hadn't carried them, birthed them, nursed them. That honor belonged to Sarah, whose memory still hung in every corner of the house. Yet here Eliza was, the one wiping their tears and kissing their hurts and tucking them in each night. One evening in mid-December, Clara came to her with something clutched in her small hands. "I found this in Mama's sewing basket," she said, holding out a half-finished quilt. "She was making it for my bed, but she never finished." Eliza took the quilt carefully. examining the delicate stitching, the pattern of stars and moons and blues and yellows. Sarah's hands had touched this fabric, guided these needles. It felt sacred somehow, precious and fragile. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Will you help me finish it?" Clara asked, her blue eyes wide with hope and hesitation. "So I can remember her? So I won't forget what her stitches looked like?" Eliza's throat tightened. "Of course I will, sweetheart. We'll finish it together." That night, after the children were in bed, Eliza spread the quilt across the kitchen table and studied the pattern, trying to understand Sarah's vision for it. Elias found her there, needle in hand, squinting in the lamplight as she attempted to match the intricate stitching. "What are you doing?" he asked, then saw the quilt and went still. "That's Sarah's." "Clara found it. She asked me to help her finish it." He was silent for so long that Eliza looked up, worried she'd overstepped some invisible boundary. But his expression wasn't angry. It was complicated, layered with emotions she couldn't quite parse. "She started that the summer before Anna was born," he said quietly, moving closer to run his fingers over the fabric. "Said she wanted Clara to have something special, something made with love. She was planning to finish it during the winter, but then—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "I'll be careful with it," Eliza promised. "I'll try to make my stitches as beautiful as hers. Your stitches don't have to be like hers." Elias pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "They just have to be yours. Clara wants this finished, and that matters more than making it perfect." Over the following weeks, finishing that quilt became a ritual. Every evening, after supper was cleared and the children were settled, Eliza would bring out the quilt and work on it by lamplight. Sometimes Clara would join her small fingers struggling with the needle but determined to contribute. Sometimes Jacob would sit nearby with a book, reading aloud while they sewed. And increasingly, Elias would join them, not sewing, but simply present, carving small wooden toys or mending tack, his quiet presence an anchor in the room. Those evenings felt like something precious forming, not the family they had been, but the family they were becoming. Different from what came before, but real nonetheless. "Tell us about Boston," Jacob said one night, looking up from his book. "What did you do there?" Eliza paused in her stitching, thinking back to a life that already felt like it had belonged to someone else. "I went to school, learned things like literature and music and French, attended church socials and afternoon teas with my mother's friends." "That sounds boring," Clara declared. Eliza laughed. "Sometimes it was, but sometimes it was nice too. Safe and predictable, which I didn't appreciate at the time." "Do you wish you were still there?" Jacob asked, his expression serious. She considered the question carefully. A month ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. But now? "Sometimes I miss parts of it," she said honestly. "I miss my mother and my friend Margaret, but I don't think I miss the life itself anymore. That Eliza, the one who lived in Boston, she was someone who'd never been tested, never had to be strong. This life has made me into someone different, someone I think I like better." Elias looked up at that, meeting her eyes across the table. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. She saw him truly seeing her for the first time, not as a solution or a substitute, but as Eliza. Just Eliza, with her own strength and struggles and worth. "You've made this house feel like a home again," he said quietly. "I didn't think that was possible." The words settled into Eliza's chest, warm and weighty. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was something, acknowledgement, appreciation, the foundation of something that might one day grow into more. Christmas approached, and with it came a flurry of preparation that kept Eliza busy from dawn until well past dark. She and Clara finished the quilt on Christmas Eve, the final stitches completed by firelight while snow fell heavy outside the windows. When they spread it across Clara's bed, the little girl burst into tears. "It's perfect," she sobbed, throwing her arms around Eliza's waist. "Thank you. Thank you for helping me remember her." "You'll always remember her, sweetheart," Eliza whispered into Clara's hair. "She's part of you. Nothing can ever change that." Christmas morning dawned clear and brilliant, the sun striking the snow-covered landscape like diamonds scattered across white velvet. The children woke early, tumbling downstairs in their nightclothes to find the modest gifts Eliza and Elias had managed to assemble, carved wooden animals from Elias for each child, a new book for Jacob, a doll with a dress Eliza had sewn for Clara, soft-knitted booties for Anna. But the real gift came after breakfast, when Elias bundled everyone into coats and mittens and led them outside to the barn. There, in one of the stalls, stood a gentle old mare with a red ribbon tied around her neck. "Her name's Buttercup," Elias announced, grinning at his children's shocked faces. "She's for all of you to learn to ride on." The children's shrieks of joy echoed through the barn, and even Eliza found herself laughing at their excitement. She caught Elias watching her, his expression soft in a way she'd never seen before. "Thank you," she said quietly, moving to stand beside him as the children swarmed the patient mare, "for making today special for them. They deserve it. They've been through so much." He paused. "So have you. I got you something too." He pulled a small package from his coat pocket and handed it to her. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a beautiful silver pendant on a delicate chain, a simple design of intertwined leaves that caught the light. "It was my mother's," Elias said, his voice rough. "She gave it to me before she died. Told me to give it to someone special. Sarah never liked silver jewelry. She preferred gold, so it's been sitting in a drawer all this time. But I thought you might like it." Eliza's hands trembled as she held the necklace. It was the most personal gift he could have given her, a piece of his history that had nothing to do with Sarah, that was meant only for her. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you, Elias. I'll treasure it." He fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin and sending unexpected shivers down her spine. They stood there for a moment, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the scent of leather and wood smoke that clung to his clothes. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. McKenna," he said softly. "Merry Christmas, Mr. McKenna." That afternoon, they all went sledding on the hill behind the barn, using an old toboggan Elias pulled from storage. The children shrieked with delight as they flew down the slope, and Elias convinced Eliza to ride down with them despite her protests. "I've never sledded in my life," she said, laughing nervously. "Then it's about time you started," he replied, settling Anna in her lap and giving them a push. The ride was terrifying and exhilarating, the cold air burning her lungs as they flew down the hill, Anna's laughter ringing in her ears. At the bottom, they tumbled into the snow in a tangle of limbs and laughter, and when Eliza looked up, breathless and covered in snow, she found Elias standing over them with an expression of such tenderness it made her heart stop. "You look happy," he said, offering his hand to pull her up. "I am happy," she realized, surprised by the truth of it. "I actually am." That night, after the children were finally asleep, exhausted from their exciting day, Eliza and Elias sat by the fire in the parlor. It had become their routine now, these quiet evening hours, when they could simply be two adults in companionable silence, not constantly in motion, not performing their roles as parents and partners. "This was a good day," Elias said, staring into the flames. "The first good Christmas since Sarah died. The children needed it." "What about you?" Eliza asked. "Did you need it?" He looked at her, surprise flickering in his gray eyes. "I think maybe I did. I've been so focused on just surviving, just getting through each day that I forgot we're supposed to be living too." "It's easy to forget, especially when you're grieving." "Are you grieving?" he asked. "For the life you left behind?" Eliza considered this. "Maybe, but it's different now. At first I was mourning what I'd lost. Now I think I'm grieving for who I used to be, that girl who'd never had to fight for anything, who didn't know her own strength. She's gone, and I don't think I want her back." "I'm glad you're here, Eliza," Elias said, using her first name for perhaps the first time since their wedding. "Not just for the children's sake, for mine too. You've brought something back to this house that I thought died with Sarah." "What's that?" "Hope. The possibility that life can be good again, different but good." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Eliza felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the knot of loneliness and fear she'd been carrying since Boston. She wasn't alone in this. They were building something together, slowly and carefully, brick by brick. "There's something I need to tell you," Elias said suddenly, his voice taking on a serious tone. "About Sarah. About how she died." Eliza waited, her heart picking up speed. This was the story he'd been avoiding, the wound he'd been protecting. "The pregnancy was difficult from the start," he began, staring into the fire rather than at her. She was sick, weak, but she insisted she'd be fine. Said she'd been through it twice before and knew what to expect. But something was wrong, I could feel it, even if the doctor said everything looked normal. He paused, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles went white. When her time came, it happened fast. Too fast. The midwife was here, helping, but there was so much blood, too much blood. Anna was born healthy, perfect, but Sarah just kept bleeding. By the time the doctor arrived from Pine Ridge, it was too late. She died in my arms while her newborn baby cried in the next room. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Elias." I promised her I'd take care of the children, that I'd make sure they knew how much she loved them. But I've been failing at that. I've been so lost in my own grief that I couldn't see they were drowning in theirs. Then you came, and you've done what I couldn't. You've helped them smile again, helped them remember that life goes on even when it feels impossible. You haven't failed them, Eliza said firmly. You've kept them safe and fed and loved. That's not failing, Elias. That's surviving an impossible situation. He finally looked at her, and she saw tears on his cheeks. She'd never seen him cry, hadn't imagined he would allow himself to be so vulnerable in front of her. "I didn't want to marry again," he said roughly. The thought of replacing Sarah felt like a betrayal, but I also knew I couldn't raise 3 children alone, couldn't give them what they needed. So I wrote those letters, made that arrangement with your father, and told myself it was just practical, just business. And now? Now I'm realizing you're not a replacement for Sarah. You're something else entirely, your own person, with your own strength and kindness. And I'm grateful for that. I don't want you to be Sarah. I want you to be Eliza. The words broke something open inside her, a dam she didn't know she'd built. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and before she could think better of it, she crossed the space between them and knelt beside his chair. "I don't want to be Sarah either," she said. "I just want to be enough as myself." "You are," he whispered, reaching out to cup her face in his rough, calloused hand. "You are enough, Eliza. More than enough." They stayed like that for a long moment, his hand on her face, her hands resting on his knees, something new and fragile forming in the space between them. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The first tentative reaching toward connection that was theirs alone, not borrowed from the past or forced by circumstance. When they finally pulled apart, the air felt charged with unspoken things. Elias stood and offered his hand to help her up, and this time when their fingers touched, neither of them pulled away quickly. They stood there, hands linked, the fire crackling beside them, and the children sleeping peacefully upstairs. "We should get some rest," Elias said finally, though he made no move to release her hand. "Yes," Eliza agreed, though she didn't want this moment to end. But as they climbed the stairs together, stopping at the top to go their separate ways, him to his room, her to the spare room where she still slept, Eliza felt something had fundamentally changed. The distance between them was still there, but it was smaller now, more navigable. They were no longer strangers sharing a house. They were partners beginning to understand each other. January brought storms that buried the ranch in snow so deep that Elias had to dig paths from the house to the barn just to tend the animals. They were completely cut off from Pine Ridge, from any outside contact, and the isolation pressed in on them from all sides. But inside the house, something was blooming. Eliza found herself seeking out Elias's company, lingering in conversations that had once been brief and perfunctory. He began helping with the children's lessons in the evenings, teaching them about the ranch and the land while Eliza covered reading and arithmetic. They developed an easy rhythm, trading tasks and responsibilities without needing to discuss them. One night, during a particularly fierce storm, little Anna woke screaming from a nightmare. Eliza heard it first and rushed to the children's room, but Elias was right behind her. Together they soothed the frightened toddler, Eliza holding her while Elias sang a soft lullaby in a voice Eliza had never heard him use before, tender and sweet and utterly at odds with his rough exterior. "You have a beautiful voice," she said as Anna finally drifted back to sleep. "Sarah used to say that," he replied, then caught himself. "Sorry, I shouldn't keep comparing." "Oh, it's all right," Eliza interrupted. "She was your wife for years. You don't have to pretend she didn't exist. I'd rather you talk about her naturally than feel like you have to hide her memory from me." He studied her in the dim light of the hall. How did you get so wise at 18? Necessity, she said with a small smile, and paying attention to what I wish people would do for me. They put Anna back in her crib and stepped into the hallway, neither quite ready to return to their separate rooms. The storm howled outside, rattling the windows, and in the darkness broken only by a single lamp, they stood closer than they ever had before. Eliza, Elias said softly, I want to ask you something. What is it? Would you... He paused, struggling with the words. Would you consider moving into our room? Not for... we don't have to, but it feels wrong, keeping separate. We're married. We should act like it. Eliza's heart hammered in her chest. What exactly are you asking? I'm asking if you're ready to be my wife in truth, not just in name. He touched her face gently. I know we agreed to wait, but it's been almost 3 months. I find myself thinking about you more and more, wanting to know you better. He trailed off, leaving the rest unspoken. I think about you too, Eliza admitted, her cheeks heating. But I'm scared. I don't know how to be a wife in that way. I don't know what you expect. I expect nothing except honesty. If you're not ready, tell me. We'll wait as long as you need. But if you are ready, his thumb traced her cheekbone. I'd like to try to build a real marriage with you, Eliza. Not just a partnership for the children's sake, but something true between us. She looked into his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once been so cold and distant, and saw warmth there now, genuine care, maybe even the beginnings of affection. I'm ready, she whispered, or at least I'm willing to try. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her. Not the chaste brush of lips from their wedding day, but a real kiss, deep and searching and full of promise. Eliza's knees went weak, and she gripped his shirt to steady herself, lost in sensations she'd never experienced before. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Elias rested his forehead against hers. We'll take it slow, he promised. I'll be patient. I just want you to know that when you're ready, truly ready, I'm here. That night, Eliza moved her belongings into the room that had been Sarah's, that was now becoming hers. Elias helped her, moving the last of Sarah's personal items to a trunk in the attic at Eliza's gentle insistence. The children can have them when they're older, she said, but I need this space to be ours now, not a shrine to what was. He agreed, and as they worked together in the lamplight, Eliza felt the last piece of resistance fall away. This was her home, her room, her marriage. Not a replacement or a consolation prize, but something real that she and Elias were building together. When the room was finally arranged to her liking, Elias drew her into his arms. Are you sure about this? I'm sure, she said, and meant it. That night, in the darkness and the warmth of that big bed, Eliza became his wife in truth. It was awkward at first, fumbling and uncertain as they learned each other, but there was tenderness too, patience, care. Elias was gentle with her inexperience, guiding her through what she didn't know, showing her without words that this could be something beautiful between them. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heartbeat, Eliza felt something settle deep in her soul. This was where she belonged, not because she'd been sent here or because duty demanded it, but because she chose it. Because in this man, in these children, in this wild and beautiful place, she'd found something worth fighting for. Thank you, Elias murmured into her hair. For what? For giving me a second chance at this. At family, at partnership, at happiness. I didn't think I deserved it. You do deserve it, Eliza said firmly. And so do I. We both deserve to be happy, Elias. We both deserve to build something good from these ashes. February brought a brief thaw, a false spring that melted the snow and turned the world to mud. The children went wild with cabin fever, desperate to be outside after months of confinement, and Eliza spent half her time trying to keep them from tracking mud through the house. But there was laughter now, constant and unforced. There were smiles and teasing and moments of pure joy that would have been unimaginable 3 months ago. Claire had taken to calling Eliza Mama when she forgot herself, then catching herself with guilty eyes, but Eliza always reassured her it was all right. "You can call me whatever feels right," she told the little girl. "I won't be upset either way." The physical relationship between Eliza and Elias deepened as winter progressed. They came together most nights now, learning each other's bodies and preferences, building an intimacy that went beyond the physical. They talked in the darkness, shared stories and fears and dreams. Eliza told him about her mother's illness, about her friend Margaret, about the life she'd left behind. He told her about his childhood on a different ranch, about meeting Sarah, about his hopes and worries for his children. They were becoming friends as well as lovers, and that felt more precious than anything Eliza had imagined marriage could be. One evening in late February, Eliza was washing dishes when she felt Elias's arms come around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "About what?" "About how wrong I was at the beginning. I told you this marriage was just for the children's sake, that I couldn't offer you romance or courtship, but that's not true anymore, is it?" Eliza turned in his arms to face him, her wet hands resting on his chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I care about you, Eliza, not just as the mother of my children or as a partner in running this house, but as you, as the woman who makes me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how, who challenges me and surprises me and makes me want to be better than I am." "Elias, I'm not saying I love you," he continued. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that word yet, if I'm honest, but I'm saying I could. I'm saying I want to. I'm saying you've become important to me in ways I didn't think were possible." Tears filled Eliza's eyes. "You've become important to me too. This life, this family, it's nothing like what I imagined, but it's become everything I want." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she tasted possibility on his lips, the possibility of love, real love, built on foundations of respect and partnership and genuine care. Not the sweep you off your feet romance of novels, but something steadier and more enduring. "We're going to be all right," he whispered against her mouth. "All of us. We're going to make this work." "We already are," Eliza replied, and in that moment, standing in her kitchen with her husband's arms around her and her stepchildren's laughter echoing from upstairs, she believed it with her whole heart. The winter that had seemed so insurmountable when it began was slowly releasing its grip. Soon it would be spring, and with spring would come new challenges and new joys. But Eliza wasn't afraid anymore. She had found her strength, her purpose, her place. She had found a family worth fighting for and a man who saw her for who she truly was. She had found home. Spring arrived not as a gentle whisper, but as a roar, the snow melting so fast that the creek behind the property swelled to twice its normal size and the roads became rivers of mud. But after months of being trapped indoors, Eliza welcomed even the mess and chaos that came with the changing season. The world was coming back to life, and so was she. She woke one morning in early March to find Elias already dressed, standing at the bedroom window and staring out at the dawn-touched landscape. She watched him for a moment, this man who had become so much more than she'd ever expected, noting the way the early light caught in his hair and softened the hard lines of his profile. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. He turned, a smile touching his lips when he saw she was awake. "Spring planting. The garden needs to be turned and prepared. And I was thinking maybe we could expand it this year. You mentioned wanting to try growing some different vegetables." "You remembered that?" "I remember everything you tell me," he said, coming to sit on the edge of the bed. He traced a finger along her jaw. "I was also thinking about how different this spring feels from last year. Last spring, I could barely drag myself out of bed each morning. Everything felt gray and hopeless. Now," he paused, searching for words, "now I wake up wanting to see what the day will bring." Eliza's heart swelled with affection. "I feel the same way. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful I came here. Grateful for all of it, even the hard parts." He leaned down to kiss her, a lingering kiss that promised more. But Anna's voice crying out from the next room interrupted them. They pulled apart with matching expressions of rueful amusement. "Duty calls," Elias said with a grin. "It always does," Eliza laughed, already throwing back the covers. The rhythm of their days had changed with the season. Elias spent long hours outside now, working the land that had lain dormant all winter, preparing for planting and tending to the cattle that had survived the brutal cold. Eliza worked alongside him when she could, learning about the ranch operations she'd been too overwhelmed to understand in those first difficult months. She discovered she had a talent for the garden, her hands seeming to know instinctively how to coax life from the dark earth. She planted seeds that Mrs. Patterson had given her back in the fall, vegetables and herbs and even some flowers, because Elias had insisted she deserved something beautiful just for herself. "You don't have to make everything practical," he'd said when she'd protested about wasting good soil on flowers. "Sometimes pretty is reason enough." The children thrived in the warmth and freedom of spring. Jacob had grown noticeably taller over the winter, shooting up so fast that his trousers were suddenly too short. He spent every spare moment following his father around the ranch, learning the work with an earnestness that made Eliza's chest ache with pride. Clara was coming into her own as well, her grief transforming from sharp edges into something softer, more bearable. She talked about her mother sometimes now, sharing memories without the desperate clinging of before. "Mama used to love spring," Clara said one afternoon as she helped Eliza plant seeds in the garden. "She said it was like the whole world was being born again." "That's a beautiful way to think about it," Eliza replied, showing her how to make a proper hole for the seed. "Your mama was clearly a wise woman. Do you think she would like you?" The question caught Eliza off guard. She sat back on her heels, considering it carefully. "I hope so. I think any mother would want someone who loves her children to be there for them. And I do love you, Clara. You and Jacob and Anna, very much." Clara looked at her with those piercing blue eyes. "I love you too. Is that okay? Am I allowed to love you both?" Eliza pulled the little girl into her arms, dirt and all. "Of course you are, sweetheart. Love isn't something that runs out. You can love your mother's memory and love me at the same time. There's room in your heart for both." "That's what Papa said too," Clara murmured into Eliza's shoulder. "He said loving you doesn't mean forgetting Mama. It just means our family is growing bigger." The words struck something deep in Eliza's chest. Elias had said that to his daughter? She blinked back tears and held Clara tighter, overwhelmed by the gift of acceptance, of belonging, of love freely given rather than grudgingly endured. That evening, after the children were in bed, Eliza found Elias in the barn checking on a mare that was due to foal any day. She leaned against the stall door and watched him work, his hands gentle and sure as he ran them over the horse's swollen belly. "Clara told me what you said to her," she said quietly, "about loving both Sarah and me." Elias glanced up, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I meant it. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to move forward without forgetting the past. I'll always love Sarah. She gave me my children, built this ranch with me, loved me when I was young and stupid and thought I knew everything. But that doesn't mean there's no room for you." "And is there room?" Eliza asked, her heart in her throat. "For me, I mean, not just as the children's caretaker or your partner in running the house, but as someone you could actually love?" He stood and came to her, cupping her face in both hands. "Eliza, I think I already do love you. I've been fighting it because it felt disloyal, but the truth is, you've made your own place in my heart. Not Sarah's place, your place. And it gets bigger every day." "Elias," her voice broke on his name. "I love the way you sing when you think no one's listening," he continued, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. "I love how you always put extra sugar in Jacob's porridge because you know he likes it sweet. I love how you've learned every aspect of this ranch because you wanted to understand my world. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you look at me like I'm something more than just a broken widower trying to hold his family together." "You're so much more than that," Eliza whispered. "You're the best man I know. Strong and honorable and capable of so much love even after everything you've lost." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of his lips against hers. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want more children with you," he said roughly. "Not to replace the ones I have, but because I want to create something new with you. A future that's ours together." The words sent a thrill through Eliza, part anticipation and part fear. What if something goes wrong? What if I... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the terror that had haunted her since learning how Sarah died. Nothing will go wrong, Elias said firmly. We'll get the doctor from Pine Ridge early. We'll be prepared. And if you don't want to take the risk, that's all right too. I have 3 beautiful children already. I'll be content with that if you are. But Eliza realized she wasn't content with that. She wanted a child of her own, a baby that would be both hers and Elias's, a living symbol of the love they'd built from such unpromising beginnings. I want it, she said. I'm scared, but I want it. Then we'll hope and pray and trust that God will watch over us, he replied, pulling her close. As April blossomed into May, Eliza's garden flourished beyond her wildest expectations. Neat rows of vegetables pushed their way through the earth, tomatoes and beans and carrots and lettuce. Her herbs thrived in the sunny corners she'd designated for them. And the flowers, those frivolous, beautiful flowers Elias had insisted on, exploded into riotous color that made her catch her breath every time she saw them. She was cutting flowers one afternoon, planning to put them on the kitchen table, when Mrs. Patterson's buggy rolled up the drive. The older woman climbed down with a basket over her arm and a knowing smile on her face. I thought I'd pay a visit and see how you were settling in, she announced. My goodness, Eliza, you look positively radiant. Country life agrees with you. Eliza laughed and invited her inside for tea. As they sat in the kitchen, Eliza's kitchen, she thought with satisfaction, Mrs. Patterson studied her with shrewd eyes. You're happy, she said. It wasn't a question. I am, Eliza admitted. I never expected to be, but I genuinely am. And Elias? How is he? Better. So much better than when I first arrived. She paused, searching for the right words. We're building something real together, not just for the children's sake, but for ourselves. Mrs. Patterson reached across the table to pat her hand. I'm glad, dear. I won't lie. I worried about you when you first arrived. You seemed so young and fragile, and Elias was so lost in his grief. I wasn't sure either of you would survive the winter, let alone thrive, but you've proved me wrong, and I've never been happier about it. I had good teachers, Eliza said. You and Mrs. Henley both helped me so much. We gave you the tools, but you did the work. You should be proud of yourself, Eliza McKenna. After Mrs. Patterson left, Eliza stood in her garden and let herself feel the full weight of that pride. She had done this. She'd taken an impossible situation and made it work. She'd loved children who weren't hers by birth and made them hers by choice. She'd opened her heart to a man who'd been certain he could never love again and coaxed him back to life. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd stepped off that stagecoach 8 months ago. She was a wife, a mother, a rancher's partner. She was strong and capable and loved. She was home. The summer stretched long and golden, filled with work and laughter and lazy evenings on the porch after the children were asleep. Elias taught Eliza to ride Buttercup, patient with her initial terror and celebrating when she finally trotted around the corral on her own. They took the children on picnics to the creek, spreading blankets on the bank and letting Jacob and Clara wade in the cool water while Anna napped in the shade. There were hard days too, of course. Days when the work seemed endless, when the heat pressed down like a physical weight, when the children squabbled and Anna was fussy and Eliza felt stretched too thin. But even on those days, she never regretted coming here. This life was hard, but it was real in a way her Boston existence never had been. One evening in July, Eliza was preparing supper when a wave of nausea hit her so hard she had to grip the counter to stay upright. Elias, who'd just come in from the barn, was at her side immediately. What's wrong? Are you sick? She took a deep breath, waiting for the nausea to pass. I don't know. I've been feeling odd for a few days now, tired, queasy. She trailed off as realization dawned, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach. Oh. Elias's eyes widened. You think you might be? I think I might be, she whispered, joy and terror warring in her chest. He let out a whoop and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop before she got sick. When he set her down, his face was split by the widest grin she'd ever seen. We're going to have a baby, he said, wonderingly. Our baby. We don't know for sure yet, Eliza cautioned, but her own smile betrayed her hope. You know, he insisted. A woman knows. Sarah always knew right away. He caught himself, wincing. Sorry, I didn't mean... It's all right, Eliza interrupted, meaning it. She was the mother of your children. She's part of our family's story. I don't need you to pretend otherwise. He pulled her close, his hand splayed across her still flat stomach. I'm going to take such good care of you, he promised. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. And this time, we're getting the doctor involved early. No risks, no chances. Elias, I'm probably only a few weeks along. We have months before... I don't care. I'm not taking any chances with you. You're too important to me. The words, delivered with such fierce protectiveness, made Eliza's eyes sting with happy tears. I love you, she said, the words coming easily now. I love you so much. I love you too, he replied, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. More than I thought possible. You've given me back my life, Eliza. You've made me whole again. They told the children at supper, and the announcement was met with mixed reactions. Jacob was thrilled, already planning how he'd teach his new sibling everything he knew. Clara was uncertain, her face clouding with worry. Will the baby make you go away like Mama did? She asked in a small voice. Eliza's heart broke at the question. She pulled Clara into her lap, holding her tight. No, sweetheart, I'm going to be just fine. Your papa and I are going to make sure of it. Promise? I promise, Eliza said, praying she could keep it. As summer ripened toward fall, Eliza's pregnancy progressed smoothly. True to his word, Elias had the doctor from Pine Ridge come out to examine her in August. Dr. Brennan pronounced her healthy and strong, the baby developing normally, and predicted a spring birth. You're built better for childbearing than Sarah was, he told her bluntly. Wider hips, stronger constitution. Barring any complications, you should come through this just fine. The reassurance helped, though Eliza couldn't quite shake the fear that lingered at the edges of her consciousness. She'd seen Sarah's grave, heard the stories of how she'd died. The specter of that possibility haunted her dreams sometimes, leaving her gasping awake in the darkness. But Elias was always there, pulling her close and murmuring reassurances until she calmed. You're not Sarah, he'd remind her. You're Eliza. Strong, capable Eliza, who survived a frontier winter and tamed my wild children and made me believe in happiness again. You're going to be fine. The garden provided bounty beyond anything Eliza had imagined. She spent long days preserving vegetables for the coming winter, canning and pickling and drying with Clara's help. The little girl had discovered a talent for cooking, and together they created stores that would see the family through the coldest months. You've done well, Elias said one evening, surveying the shelves lined with jars of preserves and pickles and sauces. Better than Sarah ever did, if I'm honest. She hated the preserving work. It was the first time he'd made a direct comparison that favored Eliza over Sarah, and while she felt a pang of guilt at taking pleasure in it, she couldn't deny the warm glow of satisfaction in her chest. She was good at this. She'd found her calling in this frontier life, discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. In September, the whole family made the trip to Pine Ridge for the autumn fair. It was Eliza's first real social outing since arriving, and she was nervous about how the townspeople would receive her, but she needn't have worried. People greeted her warmly, congratulating her on the pregnancy and praising her for the changes they'd seen in Elias and his children. You've worked a miracle with that family, one woman told her. Elias looks 10 years younger, and those children are thriving. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The fair was a revelation. So much life and energy after months of relative isolation. There were competitions for livestock and produce, games for the children, music and dancing in the evening. Eliza entered her preserves in the canning competition and was stunned when they took second place. Her pie, apple, made from Clara's recipe, didn't place, but she didn't mind. Just being here, participating, being part of this community, felt like victory enough. As evening fell and the dancing began, Elias surprised her by pulling her into his arms for a waltz. She'd taught him the steps over the summer, practicing in the parlor after the children were asleep, and now he led her around the makeshift dance floor with surprising grace. Look at us, she said, laughing up at him, dancing at a town fair like a normal couple. We are a normal couple, he replied. Maybe we didn't start that way, but we are now. She looked around at the other dancers, at their friends and neighbors watching with approval, at her children, Yes, her children, playing nearby with other youngsters. This was her life. This was her community. These were her people. I never thought I'd say this, she murmured, but I'm glad my father sent me here. I'm glad for all of it. The fear, the struggle, everything. Because it led me to this, to you. Elias pulled her closer, mindful of her growing belly. Sometimes the life you never wanted becomes the one you were meant for, he said, echoing words her mother had spoken what felt like a lifetime ago. Yes, Eliza agreed, resting her head against his chest. Yes, it does. On the wagon ride home, beneath a sky full of stars and a moon so bright it cast shadows on the road, Clara fell asleep against Eliza's shoulder while Jacob dozed beside his father, and Anna snored softly in Elias's lap. The night was cool, but not yet cold, that perfect temperature that promised the harvest would be good and winter would be kind. This was a good day, Elias said quietly, so as not to wake the children. The best, Eliza agreed. We should do something special for your birthday next month. You'll be 19, practically ancient. She laughed softly. I feel ancient sometimes, like I've lived 3 lifetimes in the past year. You've certainly earned some gray hairs, he teased. What with dealing with me and 3 children and a pregnancy all at once? I wouldn't change any of it, she said seriously. Not one single thing. He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Neither would I. Well, maybe I'd change how much of a stubborn fool I was in the beginning. I wasted months being cold to you when I could have been getting to know the remarkable woman my wife is. We got there eventually. That's what matters. We did, he agreed. And we're going to have so many more years to keep getting there. Growing old together, watching our children grow up, welcoming grandchildren someday. Building a life that's ours. The future stretched out before them, bright with possibility. A future neither of them had chosen, but both had claimed. A future built on the ashes of grief and the foundations of respect, partnership, and deepening love. As the ranch house came into view, lights glowing warm in the windows, Eliza felt something settle deep in her soul. This was home. Not the place she'd been born, not the life she'd been raised for, but the life she'd earned through courage and perseverance and the willingness to open her heart even when it was terrified. They carried the sleeping children inside, tucking them into their beds with practiced efficiency born of months of routine. When the house was finally quiet, Elias drew Eliza into their room, no longer his or Sarah's, but theirs, together. Thank you, he said, pulling her into his arms. For what? For taking a chance on us. On me. For seeing something worth fighting for when everything seemed impossible. For loving my children and teaching me how to live again. For all of it. Eliza kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into it. Thank you for letting me, she whispered against his lips. Thank you for opening your heart when it would have been so much easier to keep it closed. Thank you for building this life with me. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, 2 people who'd been brought together by necessity but had chosen each other by love. The road had been hard, the journey far from smooth, but they'd arrived at something real and precious and worth every difficulty. Outside, an owl called to its mate. The wind rustled through the willow tree above Sarah's grave, a reminder that the past was always present but no longer overwhelming. Inside, a new family had been forged from loss and hope, stronger for having been tested, richer for having been earned. And in the morning, they would wake to face whatever challenges the day brought, together. Always together. That was the promise they'd made, the commitment they'd honored, the love they'd built one day, one moment, one choice at a time. It was enough. They were enough. And the life they were creating, imperfect, difficult, beautiful, was more than either of them had dared to dream possible. October painted the Colorado landscape in shades of gold and crimson, the aspens on the mountainsides burning bright against the deep blue sky. Eliza's 19th birthday came and went with a small celebration, a cake Clara had helped bake, wildflowers Jacob had picked, and a new shawl Elias had commissioned from Mrs. Patterson, soft wool in a deep green that brought out the color of Eliza's eyes. You spoil me, she'd said, running her hands over the fine weave. Not nearly enough, Elias had replied, kissing her temple. You deserve the world, and all I can give you is a shawl. But he was wrong. He'd given her so much more than that. He'd given her a home, a family, a purpose. He'd given her his heart, slowly and carefully, like the precious gift it was. And now, with her belly growing round with their child, he was giving her the future she'd never dared to imagine. The pregnancy progressed through autumn with only minor discomforts. Eliza tired more easily now, her back aching from the extra weight she carried, but she refused to let it slow her down completely. There was too much to do. Winter preparations to complete, children to care for, a household to run. Elias fretted constantly, trying to take tasks away from her, but she stubbornly insisted on maintaining her routine. "I'm pregnant, not an invalid," she'd remind him when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry or kneading bread. "You're carrying my child," he'd counter. "That makes you the most precious thing in this world to me. Let me help." They compromised, as they'd learned to do on so many things. She would do the lighter tasks and accept his help with the heavier ones. She would rest when she needed to, but wouldn't be confined to bed like some delicate flower. It was a dance they were still learning, this balance between his protectiveness and her independence, but they were getting better at it with each passing day. In November, as the first serious snows began to fall, Eliza received a letter that made her hand shake as she opened it. The handwriting on the envelope was her mother's. Shakier than it used to be, but unmistakably hers. She'd written faithfully to her mother since arriving in Colorado, long letters detailing her new life, the children, her growing feelings for Elias. Her mother's responses had been infrequent, limited by her illness and the difficulty of getting mail during the winter months. But this letter had made it through, and Eliza clutched it like a lifeline as she read. "My dearest Eliza," her mother wrote, "your last letter brought me such joy I wept for an hour afterward. To know that you are happy, that you have found love in such an unlikely place, fills my heart with more gratitude than I can express. I was so afraid we had condemned you to misery by sending you west, but you have proven once again that you are stronger and wiser than any of us knew. Your father asks about you constantly, though he would never admit it. He misses you terribly and regrets that circumstances forced his hand in arranging your marriage. But even he can see from your letters that you have flourished in ways you never could have here. I pray every day for your health and the health of your baby. I dream of meeting my grandchild someday, of seeing the life you have built with my own eyes. Perhaps when spring comes and travel is easier, we might visit? I know it is much to ask, but I long to see you, my darling girl." Eliza pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Her mother wanted to visit. Her mother was proud of her. The validation she hadn't known she needed washed over her in waves, loosening something tight in her chest that had been there since the day she'd left Boston. Elias found her in the parlor, still holding the letter, her face wet with tears. He was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "What's wrong? Is it bad news?" "No," she managed through her tears. "Good news. The best news. My mother wants to visit in the spring. She's proud of me, Elias. She's proud of the life we've built." He held her while she cried, understanding that these were tears of relief and joy rather than sorrow. When she finally calmed, he took the letter and read it himself, a smile crossing his face. "Of course they can visit," he said. "This is your home. Your family is welcome here any time." "Even my father?" Eliza asked tentatively. The man who'd sold her into this arrangement was not high on Elias's list of favorite people. "Even your father," Elias confirmed. "He did us both a favor, even if his methods were questionable. If he hadn't sent you here, I'd still be a miserable widower stumbling through life. So yes, I can forgive him. I might even thank him." Eliza laughed through her tears and kissed him. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour," he teased. "I was starting to worry. I love you. Impossibly, completely, forever." "Forever sounds about right," he agreed, pulling her close. Winter settled in with the same fierce intensity as the year before, but this time Eliza was prepared. She knew what to expect, how to manage the constant work of keeping the household running in brutal cold. More than that, she had Elias truly beside her now, not as a distant employer, but as a partner and lover who anticipated her needs and supported her without being asked. The children had grown and changed so much in the past year. Jacob, now 9, was becoming a capable ranch hand, taking on responsibilities that would have seemed impossible for someone his age back in Boston. Clara had blossomed into a confident, happy child who called Eliza Mama without hesitation now, who brought her wildflowers and told her secrets and trusted her completely. And Anna, no longer a baby but a chattering toddler, knew no other mother than Eliza and clung to her with fierce devotion. Christmas came again, their second together, and it was everything the first had been and more. They decorated the house with pine boughs and holly, baked cookies until the kitchen smelled like heaven, sang carols around the piano while snow fell softly outside. Elias had carved elaborate wooden toys for each child, a horse for Jacob, a doll's cradle for Clara, a pull-toy duck for Anna. Eliza had sewn new clothes for everyone, her stitches neat and sure now, nothing like the fumbling attempts of a year ago. On Christmas morning, as they all gathered around the tree, Elias handed Eliza a small box. Inside was a delicate gold locket on a chain. When she opened it, she found two tiny portraits, one of herself, one of Elias. "So you'll always have me close to your heart," he said softly, "the way you're always close to mine." She burst into tears. The pregnancy made her cry at everything now, and threw her arms around his neck. "It's perfect. You're perfect. All of this is perfect." "Mama's crying again," Anna observed matter-of-factly. "Happy tears," Claire explained with the wisdom of her 6 years. "Grown-ups cry when they're happy sometimes." "That's silly," Jacob said, but he was smiling. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Anna in her new nightgown, Clara with her doll settled in its new cradle, Jacob with his carved horse on the shelf beside his bed, Eliza and Elias sat together by the fire. She was nestled against his side, his arm around her shoulders, his free hand resting on her belly where their baby kicked and turned. "Do you remember last Christmas?" she asked. "How awkward everything was? How we barely knew each other?" "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I'd ever met," Elias said. "Coming all this way to marry a stranger, facing down 3 grieving children and a broken man. I didn't show it well, but I was in awe of you from the start." "I was terrified," Eliza admitted. "Of you, of the children, of this whole enormous life I didn't know how to navigate. I cried myself to sleep most nights those first few weeks." "I know, I heard you." At her surprised look, he added, "The walls aren't that thick. It broke my heart, but I didn't know how to comfort you. Didn't think I had the right, since I was the cause of your unhappiness. You weren't the cause, circumstances were the cause, and you became the solution." She turned to look up at him. "You gave me exactly what I needed, even when neither of us knew what that was. You gave me time and space and patience. You let me find my own way while making sure I never felt truly alone. That was the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." He kissed her, slow and sweet, a kiss that promised forever. "You've given me back my life," he said against her lips. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions, doing what needed to be done, but not really living. You changed that. You made me want to wake up in the morning, want to see what the day would bring, want to build a future instead of just mourning the past." "We built it together," Eliza corrected. "Every day, every choice, every moment. Together." January and February passed in a blur of cold and routine and the growing anticipation of the baby's arrival. Dr. Brennan had predicted a late March or early April birth, and as winter began its slow retreat toward spring, Eliza found herself both eager and terrified for what was coming. The fear crept up on her at unexpected moments. She'd be folding laundry or cooking supper, and suddenly she'd remember Sarah, remember how she'd died, and panic would seize her chest like a vice. What if the same thing happened to her? What if she left Elias a widower again, left these children she'd come to love as her own without a mother once more? Elias always seemed to know when the fear gripped her. He'd appear at her side, pull her into his arms, and murmur reassurances until her breathing calmed. "You're strong," he'd remind her. "Dr. Brennan said you're healthy. We're prepared this time. Everything will be fine." "You can't know that," she'd whisper. "No," he'd agree. "But I can believe it, and I can be here, every step of the way, making sure you have everything you need." In early March, with the baby's arrival imminent, Elias insisted that Mrs. Patterson come stay at the ranch. The older woman was delighted to be included, arriving with her carpet bag and a wealth of experience, having attended dozens of births over her years in Pine Ridge. "You're going to do wonderfully, dear," she assured Eliza. "I can tell just by looking at you. Strong bones, healthy color, baby sitting right where it should be. This will all be over before you know it, and you'll have a beautiful baby in your arms." But when Eliza's pains began on a cold morning in late March, all the reassurances in the world couldn't chase away the fear. It started as a dull ache in her lower back, something she initially dismissed as the normal discomfort of late pregnancy. But as the morning progressed, the aches became cramps, and the cramps became sharp pains that took her breath away. "Elias," she called, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "I think it's time." What followed was chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Elias sent Jacob racing to Pine Ridge to fetch Dr. Brennan, while he and Mrs. Patterson helped Eliza upstairs to bed. Clara hovered in the doorway, her face pale with worry, until Mrs. Patterson gently sent her to watch Anna and keep her occupied. "Everything's going to be fine," Elias kept saying, gripping Eliza's hand so tightly it almost hurt. "You're going to be fine." But as the hours passed and the pains grew stronger, Eliza wasn't so sure. This hurt in ways she couldn't have imagined, pain that seemed to split her in two and left her gasping and crying. Through it all, Elias stayed beside her, letting her squeeze his hand until his fingers went white, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragements that she barely heard through the haze of pain. Dr. Brennan arrived in the early afternoon, examining Eliza with businesslike efficiency before declaring that everything looked normal. "First babies take their time," he said. "Could be hours yet. Just keep breathing, Mrs. McKenna. You're doing fine." But it wasn't hours. As evening approached, the pains intensified until Eliza was sobbing with each contraction, certain she was going to die just like Sarah had, certain she'd never meet the baby she could feel moving through her body toward birth. "I can't do this," she gasped between contractions. "Elias, I can't." "Yes, you can," he said fiercely, his face close to hers. "You're the strongest person I know, Eliza McKenna. You survived a frontier winter. You tamed my wild children. You made me fall in love again when I thought it was impossible. You can do this. I know you can." "What if something goes wrong? What if I—" "Nothing is going wrong," Dr. Brennan interrupted firmly. "I can see the baby's head. A few more pushes and you'll be holding your child. Mrs. Patterson, get ready." What happened next was a blur of pain and effort, and voices telling her to push harder, just a little more. Eliza bore down with everything she had, feeling like she was being torn apart, certain this was the end. And then, suddenly, impossibly, there was release, and a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a girl," Dr. Brennan announced, holding up a tiny, squalling infant. A healthy baby girl. Eliza collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief and exhaustion and overwhelming joy. A girl. She had a daughter. She'd survived, and her baby had survived, and everything was going to be all right. Mrs. Patterson cleaned the baby quickly and efficiently before placing her in Eliza's arms. She was perfect, tiny and red-faced and furious at being born, but perfect nonetheless. Dark hair like Elias's, a button nose, impossibly small fingers that gripped Eliza's thumb with surprising strength. "Hello, little one," Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama. I'm so happy to meet you." Elias leaned over them both, his own face wet with tears, his expression full of wonder. "She's beautiful. She's perfect. You're perfect." He kissed Eliza's forehead, then the baby's. "Thank you. Thank you for this gift, for being safe, for giving me another chance at this." "What should we name her?" Eliza asked, looking up at her husband. They'd discussed names for months, never quite settling on one that felt right, but now, looking at her daughter's face, Eliza knew exactly what she wanted. "Grace," she said. "I want to name her Grace, because that's what she is. Grace we didn't earn but received anyway. A new beginning, a symbol of everything good we've built together." Elias smiled through his tears. "Grace McKenna, it's perfect." Dr. Brennan finished his work and declared both mother and baby healthy. "You did beautifully, Mrs. McKenna. No complications, No excessive bleeding. Everything exactly as it should be. You'll be up and around in a few days. After the doctor and Mrs. Patterson left the room to give them privacy, Elias climbed carefully into bed beside Eliza, wrapping his arm around her shoulders as she cradled their daughter. They sat like that for a long time, just looking at the miracle they'd created, marveling at her tiny perfection. "Can we come in?" Clara's voice came from the doorway, tentative and hopeful. "We want to meet our sister." "Of course," Eliza said, smiling at her stepdaughter. "Come meet Grace." The children crept in, Jacob tall and trying to look mature, Clara bouncing with excitement, Anna toddling alongside, holding Mrs. Patterson's hand. They gathered around the bed, eyes wide with wonder as they looked at the baby. "She's so small," Jacob breathed. "Was I ever that small?" "Smaller, actually," Elias said. "You were a tiny thing when you were born." Clara reached out a tentative finger to touch Grace's hand, and the baby's fingers immediately wrapped around it. "She likes me," Clara exclaimed, delighted. "Of course she does," Eliza said. "You're her big sister. She's going to look up to you and learn from you." "Baby," Anna said, trying to climb onto the bed for a closer look. Elias scooped her up, letting her see Grace from his arms. They stayed like that for a while. The whole family gathered around the newest member, and Eliza felt her heart swell so large she thought it might burst. This was her family, these children, this man, this baby in her arms. This was the life she'd built from fear and duty and eventually love. This was home. Over the following weeks, as Eliza recovered and adjusted to life with a newborn, the whole household adapted to accommodate Grace's presence. Clara appointed herself the baby's chief protector, running to alert Eliza at the slightest whimper. Jacob was fascinated by every stage of the baby's development, asking endless questions about how babies grew and learned. Even Anna, initially jealous of the attention Grace received, gradually warmed to her new sister and could often be found patting the baby's head with surprising gentleness. Elias was completely besotted. He'd been a good father to his older children, but there was something different about experiencing this from the beginning with Eliza by his side. He took every opportunity to hold Grace, walking the floors with her when she cried at night, singing to her in that beautiful voice Eliza had discovered, staring at her with an expression of such tender adoration it made Eliza's chest ache. "I didn't think I could love anyone more than I loved my first three," he confessed one night as he rocked Grace to sleep. "But having her with you, knowing we created her together, it's different somehow. It doesn't diminish what I feel for Jacob, Clara, and Anna. It just expands everything, makes the world bigger and brighter." "I know what you mean," Eliza said. "I love all four of them so much. The three who made me a mother by choice, and the one who made me a mother by birth. They're all mine, and I'm all theirs." Spring arrived in full force, the world exploding into green and gold. Eliza's mother's letters came more frequently now that mail could get through reliably, and she confirmed that she and Eliza's father would visit in June. Eliza was nervous about seeing her parents again, worried that they'd judge the life she'd built, or find it lacking somehow. But she was also excited to show them what she'd accomplished, to prove that their sacrifice, and hers, had been worth it. The letter that arrived in early May, however, changed everything. Eliza was nursing Grace in the parlor, enjoying the quiet of mid-afternoon while the other children napped, when Elias came in with an envelope. His expression was strange, not worried exactly, but serious. "This just arrived from Boston," he said, handing it to her. "It's not your mother's handwriting?" With a sinking feeling, Eliza opened the letter. It was from Margaret, her dear friend, and the first line made her gasp. "Dearest Eliza, I'm writing with news I wish I didn't have to share. Your mother passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 weeks ago. Your father asked me to inform you, as he is not in a state to right himself. The funeral has already taken place. We couldn't wait for word to reach you and for you to travel back. I'm so very sorry, my dear friend. Your mother spoke of you constantly and was so proud of the life you'd built in Colorado." The letter continued, but Eliza couldn't read through her tears. Her mother was gone. The woman who'd raised her, loved her, encouraged her to be brave even when being brave had seemed impossible. Gone. And Eliza hadn't been there, hadn't said goodbye, would never see her again. Elias took Grace from her arms and passed the baby to Mrs. Patterson, who'd appeared in the doorway drawn by Eliza's sobs. Then he pulled Eliza into his arms and let her cry, holding her while she grieved, offering no empty platitudes but simply being there the way he always was. "I should have gone back," Eliza sobbed into his chest. "I should have visited. I should have—" "You couldn't have known," Elias said firmly. "And your mother knew you loved her. Your letters told her that. She died knowing you were happy and settled and building a beautiful life. That's what she wanted for you. She was supposed to visit. She was supposed to meet Grace." "I know, love, I know." The grief was a physical weight pressing down on Eliza's chest until she could barely breathe. For days she moved through her routines mechanically, caring for the children and the baby because they needed her, but feeling hollow inside. The mother who'd been her anchor, her confidant, her greatest supporter, gone. And the distance that had once seemed like an adventure now felt like a chasm she could never cross. But slowly, with Elias's patient support and the children's innocent need for her attention, Eliza began to heal. She realized that her mother had given her everything she needed to survive this grief: strength, resilience, the ability to find joy even in sorrow. Her mother lived on in the lessons she'd taught, in the wisdom she'd shared, in the love she'd instilled in her daughter's heart. "She'd be so proud of you," Elias said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Grace was asleep in Eliza's arms, and the other children were playing in the yard. "Look at everything you've built here. Look at this family, this life." She'd see all this and know that sending you here was the right choice. "Do you think so?" Eliza asked, wanting desperately to believe it. "I know so. You've become exactly the kind of woman she hoped you'd be. Strong, compassionate, capable of great love. That's her legacy, Eliza. That's how she lives on." Another letter arrived in late May, this one from her father. His handwriting was shaky, his words stilted with grief and regret, but the meaning was clear. He was proud of her, he was sorry for the way things had happened, and he wanted to visit, if she'd allow it, to meet his grandchildren and see the life his daughter had made. Eliza wrote back immediately, welcoming him. She had no anger left for him, no resentment over the arrangement that had brought her here. How could she, when it had led to this? To Elias and the children, to Grace and this ranch, to a life richer and fuller than anything she could have had in Boston. Her father arrived in June, looking older and more fragile than Eliza remembered. The journey had been hard on him, and grief had carved new lines into his face. But when he saw Eliza, healthy and strong and glowing with the confidence of someone who'd found her place in the world, his eyes filled with tears. "My girl," he said, embracing her, "look at you. Look at what you've become." "I'm happy, Papa," she said simply. "I know that wasn't the plan when you sent me here, but I'm truly happy." Over the week of his visit, Charles Callahan got to know his son-in-law and grandchildren. He watched Eliza work alongside Elias, saw how they moved together with the easy rhythm of a couple who truly knew each other. He observed the way the children adored their mother, how they sought her out for comfort and guidance and love. He held baby Grace and wept, telling Eliza that she looked just like her mother had at that age. On his last evening at the ranch, he pulled Eliza aside. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I've been carrying guilt about sending you here, about forcing you into an arrangement you didn't want. But seeing you now, seeing the life you've built, I realize it was the best thing I could have done for you." "Papa, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "In Boston, you would have married some acceptable young man from our social circle. You would have had a comfortable life, certainly, but a small one, limited, constrained by all the expectations and rules of society. Here, you've become someone extraordinary. You've found love, real love, and built a family that's yours by choice as much as by birth. You've discovered strength you never knew you had. I didn't do you a disservice, Eliza. I gave you wings, even if neither of us knew it at the time." Eliza hugged her father, tears streaming down both their faces. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me this chance, even if it was born of desperation. Thank you for everything." "Your mother was right about you," he said. "She always said you'd find your way, that you were stronger than you looked. I wish she could see you now." "She can," Eliza said with certainty. "Wherever she is, she can see, and she knows." After her father left, the summer settled into a peaceful rhythm. Eliza's garden flourished once again, providing bounty for the table and pride in her heart. Grace grew rapidly, becoming more alert and responsive every day. The older children thrived under the structure and love Eliza and Elias provided, and the ranch prospered, blessed by good weather and hard work, and the partnership of two people who'd learned to pull in the same direction. One evening in late July, the whole family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. It had become a ritual of sorts, this quiet time together at the end of the day. Jacob sat on the steps, whittling a piece of wood. Clara had Grace in her lap, making faces to make the baby smile. Anna was pressed against Elias's side, sucking her thumb and fighting sleep. And Eliza sat beside her husband, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. "This is my favorite time of day," Clara said, not looking up from the baby. "When we're all together like this." "Mine too," Jacob agreed. "Mine three," Anna mumbled around her thumb. Elias chuckled and kissed the top of Anna's head. "What about you, Mrs. McKenna? Is this your favorite time?" Eliza looked around at her family, at the children she'd come to love, at the baby she'd birthed, at the man who'd captured her heart when she'd thought it impossible. She thought about the frightened girl who'd stepped off a stagecoach 14 months ago, certain her life was over. She thought about the journey from fear to acceptance to genuine happiness. She thought about all the small moments and large triumphs that had brought her here, to this porch, to this family, to this perfect, imperfect life. "Every moment is my favorite," she said, "because every moment led me here to all of you." "Even the hard moments?" Claire asked. "Especially the hard moments," Eliza confirmed. "They taught me who I could be. They showed me what I was capable of. Without them, I wouldn't appreciate this, all of this, nearly as much as I do." Elias pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You know what I was thinking about earlier?" "What?" "About how I used to stand at Sarah's grave every evening, trapped in the past, unable to move forward. And now I'm here, on this porch, watching sunsets with you and our children, firmly planted in the present and looking forward to the future. That's what you gave me, Eliza. The ability to live again, not just exist." "We gave that to each other," Eliza corrected. "You gave me a place to belong, a family to love, a purpose I never knew I needed. We saved each other, Elias." As the sun sank below the mountains and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Eliza felt a peace so complete it was almost overwhelming. She'd traveled across a continent to marry a stranger, had faced loneliness and fear and grief, had worked harder than she'd ever imagined possible. But every struggle had been worth it for this. For the warmth of Elias's arm around her, for the sound of her children's laughter, for the life they'd all built together from the ruins of loss and the foundation of hope. "Mama?" Clara's voice broke into her thoughts. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "I used to think that when Papa married you, we were losing Mama forever, like you were erasing her or replacing her." Clara looked up, her blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, serious and clear. "But now I understand that's not how it works. Mama will always be my first mama, the one who gave birth to me and loved me. But you're my mama too, the one who's here now, loving me and teaching me and helping me grow. I have two mamas, and that makes me luckier than most kids, not less lucky." Eliza's vision blurred with tears. "That's exactly right, Clara. You are lucky. Lucky to have been born to a woman who loved you so much, and lucky that I get to love you now. We're both your mothers, just in different ways." "Do you think she would like you?" Clara asked. "My first mama?" Eliza thought about Sarah, beautiful, beloved Sarah, who died bringing life into the world. "I hope so. I think any mother would appreciate someone who loved her children and cared for them when she couldn't be there anymore. I like to think we would have been friends, your first mama and me." "I think so too," Clara said, smiling. She looked down at Grace, who'd fallen asleep in her arms. "And I'm going to tell Grace all about her, about both of you, so she knows where she came from and all the love that brought her here." "That's perfect," Elias said, his voice rough with emotion. "That's exactly what we should do, honor the past while celebrating the present." As full darkness fell and the children began to yawn, they moved inside for the nightly routine that had become so familiar and precious. Baths and bedtime stories, prayers and tucking in, kisses and promises to see each other in the morning. When all four children were finally asleep, Eliza and Elias stood in the hallway, looking in on each of them in turn. Jacob sprawled across his bed with a book fallen open beside him. Clara curled up with the quilt they'd finished together, the one with Sarah's stitches and Eliza's side by side. Anna clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, one thumb in her mouth. And Grace, tiny and perfect in her cradle, breathing softly in the darkness. "We did good," Elias whispered, wrapping his arms around Eliza from behind. "We did," she agreed, leaning back against his chest. They went to their room, the room that had been Sarah's, then Elias's, and was now truly theirs, and prepared for bed. As they lay together in the darkness, Elias's hand on Eliza's waist and her head on his shoulder, they talked quietly about plans for the coming days, for the harvest season, for the winter ahead. "I love you," Elias said, the words coming easily now, naturally, said and heard every day, but never losing their power. "I love you more than I thought possible. You've made me whole again, Eliza." "I love you too," she replied, turning to kiss him. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted. A home, a family, a purpose, a partnership. You've made me the woman I was meant to be." They made love slowly, tenderly, celebrating the connection they'd forged and the future they were building. And afterward, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Eliza thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Boston to Colorado, from fear to courage, from loneliness to love. From a girl who'd been sold into marriage to a woman who'd claimed that marriage and made it her own. "Sometimes," she whispered into the darkness, "the life you never wanted becomes the one you were meant for." "And sometimes," Elias replied, "the person you didn't choose becomes the one you couldn't imagine living without." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the life they'd created, blessed by the past and hopeful for the future. Outside, the Colorado night was full of stars, and somewhere in that vast darkness, Eliza liked to imagine her mother and Sarah watching over them, pleased with what their sacrifices and love had made possible. The virgin bride who'd healed the rancher's heart had found her own healing in return. She'd built a family from fragments, created love from duty, and discovered that sometimes the greatest blessings come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. She was Eliza McKenna now, wife and mother, pioneer and partner, a woman who'd journeyed across a continent and found home in the last place she'd expected. And as the seasons turned and the years passed, as children grew and the ranch prospered and love deepened into something unshakable, Eliza would look back on that terrified girl who'd stepped off a stagecoach into an uncertain future and barely recognize her. That girl had been transformed by love and work and the simple daily choice to embrace life rather than merely endure it. The life she'd been given had become the life she'd claimed, and that, Eliza knew with absolute certainty, was the most beautiful ending of all.